Hey guys, tonight we slip into a dim medieval dawn, the kind of morning where fog clings low across the fields and the air carries that sour mixture of wet hay, smoke, and the faint tang of manure. The air is cold enough to sting your lungs, yet heavy with the smell of yesterday's fires that never burned clean. You stretch under your thin wool blanket, rough as sandpaper against your skin, and the first sound you hear is not birdsong but whispers, low, sharp words traded at the edge of the village. Rumours always travel faster than truth, and this time they speak of a sickness drifting steadily closer, a shadow that devours whole families in neighbouring towns. It hasn't touched your body yet, but already it gnaws at your thoughts. And yes, if we're being honest, you probably won't survive this one. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know your location and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step outside into the mud lane, bare feet sinking into the muck, and the cold travels upward, numbing your toes. Around you, huts lean against one another like weary shoulders. The thatch drips from last night's rain, and smoke leaks out of crooked chimneys. Chickens scratch through soggy straw, and a pig grunts lazily, nose buried in muck. You hear a neighbour cough through a wall so thin you could almost see through it, and the sound shoots a chill down your spine. Every sneeze, every throat clearing feels like a warning bell, even when it's just the usual morning scratchiness. The air itself seems to echo with unease. At the village well, people gather, clutching buckets and news. A woman swears that in the next town an entire household fell in a week, boils on their skin, black spots like ink stains, and a death so swift no priest dared perform last rites. Another man mutters about poisoned wells, while someone else insists it's God's anger for too much sin. Historians still argue whether the very first sparks of the Black Death flared from Central Asia, or simmered quietly in European ports before exploding. But for you, standing in line for water, that scholarly puzzle is meaningless. All you feel is dread, heavy as the bucket handle biting your palms, and the sudden fear that every drop you raise might carry poison in it. Back at your hut, the children are still asleep, tangled together on straw, breathing small clouds in the chill. You kneel, placing a hand near their chests just to be sure they rise and fall. You never used to check, but fear makes habits out of paranoia. Every cough is a drumbeat, every restless shuffle a spark of panic. You watch the youngest stir, hair tangled, nose running, and wonder whether a runny nose is still just a runny nose. There's a quirky little tidbit you've picked up from the travelling peddler. Keep a crust of bread in your pocket and the plague will leave you alone. Supposedly death prefers to nibble and then pass by. Ridiculous maybe, but you already carry dried herbs tied in cloth, a bone charm from your grandmother, even a coin with a hole worn through it. Why not bread too? When survival feels like a dice game, even superstition becomes strategy. You pat your pocket, half tempted to slip a crumb inside even as you laugh at yourself. By mid-morning the church bell clangs, pulling the whole village into the yard. The sound is flat, almost hollow, and people shuffle forward with more hesitation than eagerness. You join the crowd, the ground soft beneath your knees as the priest's voice wavers. He begs for mercy, his Latin strained with fear, his hands trembling as he grips the altar. Some priests, you've heard, already abandon their flocks elsewhere, and though yours still stands before you, the look in his eyes doesn't inspire confidence. The poor have always leaned on faith as their thinnest blanket, and even a thin blanket is better than nothing. But you notice how many heads bow more out of habit than conviction. When the prayers end, you linger by the graves. Some mounds are fresh, though not from plague, just winter's usual casualties, hunger and fever. Still, villagers dig new pits ahead of time, sharpening spades as though rehearsing. The wooden crosses look fragile, bark still rough, names carved in clumsy strokes. You trail a finger across one and feel how temporary everything is. The graveyard smells of turned soil, wet grass and old smoke, and you realise how much space has already been prepared for what has yet to come. Later, on the lane, you pass a trader's cart rattling with garlic ropes. He swears they will shield your lungs. You laugh politely, wrinkle your nose at the smell and keep walking. Hours later, you regret it. Even the illusion of safety would be worth a few pennies. Garlic might not stop death, but at least it could remind you of suppers before fear became the main seasoning. Afternoon stretches grey and long. The market stalls feel half empty, the usual chatter gone. A farmer sells beans, but his eyes dart constantly, as if waiting for someone to collapse beside him. The fishmonger, once loud and booming, mutters now in a voice barely above a whisper. Conversations cut short. Laughter dies quickly. People behave as though every word might summon something they'd rather keep away. The village feels muffled, as if the air itself has agreed to keep silent. By evening you light your small oil lamp. Shadows stretch like long fingers across the wall, and the flame sputters with every draught that sneaks through the cracks. Outside, the gossip is louder now. The plague has reached the next village over. You picture invisible feet marching steadily toward you, every rumour another step closer. You curl on your straw bed, the scratching of mice in the thatch reminding you of how easily small creatures slip between walls. You don't yet know the role rats and their fleas will play, but your instincts already whisper that the real danger isn't only in human breath. Sleep does not come easily. When it finally does, it brings fevered dreams, skies split by comets, coughing echoes, the sting of heat behind your eyes. You see faces you know twist and vanish, houses collapsing into ash, and fields overrun by crows. You wake with a start, clutching your chest, relieved to feel the steady rhythm of your own heart. Yet the dread is still there, crouched like an unwelcome guest at the foot of your bed, patient and waiting, ready to stay for nights to come. That is how the first day under the shadow of the Black Death begins, not with bodies piling yet, but with whispers, uneasy glances, sharpened spades, and the creeping realization that the world you knew yesterday may already be gone. The morning creeps in grey, and the fog still clings to the thatched roofs as you rise. Your muscles ache from sleeping on straw, but there's little time to stretch or yawn when survival presses in on every side. The air inside your hut is thick, heavy with the smell of smoke from last night's hearth and the sour damp of unwashed clothes. You push aside the curtain of rough cloth that serves as a door and step into the lane, where the world of the poor unfolds in its crowded, creaking rhythm. Every hut looks nearly identical. Low walls of wattle and daub patched with clay and manure, roofs sagging with age. Privacy is a luxury you've never known. You can hear arguments, lullabies, and prayers from your neighbours as though they were happening in your own home. The poor live close, always close, breathing the same stale air, sharing the same fleas that bite from one body to the next. When a sickness comes, you already know it won't politely stop at anyone's doorstep. You trudge to fetch water, stepping carefully over puddles that reflect the cloudy sky. Behind you, a baby wails, and a woman's tired voice tries to soothe it with a lullaby you've heard so many times you could hum along. Even the lullabies sound thinner these days, stretched with worry. You pass a cluster of children kicking a rag-stuffed ball, their laughter momentarily bright, but the sound feels fragile, as though one cough could shatter it. You glance at them, secretly wondering which of those small faces might vanish before winter ends. Your own stomach growls. Breakfast is meagre, yesterday's bread, hard as wood, dipped in weak ale. The drink is sour, but it's safer than water most days. You chew slowly, jaw aching from the effort, wishing for butter or cheese, luxuries that seem more distant with each passing week. Hunger gnaws constantly at the poor. Some days it feels like the plague might simply be another name for hunger with a faster hand. There's a historical fact you can't help but notice in your own life. Poor families often share one room, the animals included. Goats, chickens, even the family pig might sleep under the same roof, not from affection but necessity. Their body heat keeps you warm in the bitter nights. Tonight you'll fall asleep with the smell of dung in your nostrils and the sound of snorting in your ears. It's disgusting, yet without them, the frost would claim you. Still, you can't shake the awareness that living so close, human and beast together, means sickness can jump like a flea from skin to skin. Scholars centuries later will argue endlessly whether the plague came from rats, from fleas, from trade ships, or from foul air itself. But you don't need a degree to know that crowded huts make for easy prey. Inside your home, space is scarce. You share your straw bed with siblings, your elbows constantly bumping in the night. When someone coughs, the sound explodes in your ear. You pull the blanket over your face, pretending it offers protection, though it smells of sweat and mildew. In truth, the fabric is no more shield than a spider's web. But to a poor villager, pretending often feels like the only defence left. You catch yourself daydreaming about castles, where nobles live with wide stone halls, private chambers, and windows that actually open. You imagine fresh air sweeping sickness away. Then you smirk at your own fantasy. Word is that even nobles can't escape. Wealthy or poor, the plague does not bow. The only difference is that they'll be buried with prayers in Latin and polished coffins, while your body might meet the earth in a shallow pit. A quirky detail passes through your thoughts. In some places, families smear vinegar on their doors, believing it forms an invisible shield. You've heard of another village where people rub onions on their skin, as if scaring death away with tears. You consider both, shaking your head, but part of you files it away. In desperate times, even an onion sounds like armour. The lane grows busier as the day warms. Farmers shuffle past with tools slung over shoulders. The clang of iron on stone echoes faintly from the blacksmith's hut, sparks flashing in the dim light. Somewhere, a cow moos with impatience tugging against its rope. Life continues even under the shadow of dread. The poor cannot afford stillness. Stillness means hunger, and hunger, like plague, is patient but merciless. By midday, the village hums with cramped energy. You help prepare the hut roof with handfuls of straw, your fingers nicked by sharp stalks. Above, the sky is pale, washed of colour, as though even the sun has lost its courage. The work is tiring, your back aching, but there's an odd comfort in the rhythm: stack, press, tie. For a moment it almost feels like life before the rumours began, yet the moment passes. Across the lane a man coughs deep, rattling, and spits into the mud. You notice how quickly people edge away, pretending not to notice. No one dares speak it aloud, but every sound of sickness is another toll of the bell. You swallow, throat suddenly dry. As the day drags toward evening, the crowd of huts feels smaller, tighter, as though the walls themselves are inching closer. Children chase one another, laughter turning into wheezes. Mothers stir thin stews, the smell of cabbage and barley floating weakly into the air. Dogs bark, pigs grunt, men curse at stubborn tools. The village is alive, but under the noise runs an undercurrent of dread, like a drumbeat you can't ignore. By nightfall you crawl back into your hut, the fire a small glow in the hearth. Smoke curls upward, clinging to the rafters, stinging your eyes. The children huddle close, their breaths warm against your cheek. Outside, the wind moans through cracks, carrying the distant bark of dogs and the creak of timbers. You close your eyes, but you know the walls are too thin, the beds too crowded, the air too stale. If sickness slips into this hut, there will be nowhere to hide. And that is the cruel truth of the poor. In crowded huts, every cough is a threat, every sneeze a gamble, and survival feels like waiting your turn in a game you never agreed to play. The first light of dawn spills weakly through the cracks of your hut, and already your body feels heavy. The straw beneath you is damp from the night's chill, and as you rise, every joint protests with a dull ache. Your day is not yours, it belongs to the fields. The weight of hunger drives you onward. The thought of failing crops pressing on your chest heavier than the hoe you will soon carry. You rub your eyes, catch the faint scent of smoke still clinging to your clothes, and step outside. The morning air tastes of wet earth, and the faint sourness of dung. A reminder that poverty never grants clean beginnings. Work waits, relentless as the seasons. Your Lord does not care that plague stalks the land. Wheat and barley cannot be abandoned, even when the world is unravelling. You shoulder your hoe, its wooden handle worn smooth by years of calloused palms. The path to the fields is narrow, rutted with the grooves of cartwheels, and as you walk you pass neighbours trudging the same direction. Their faces are hollow, eyes ringed dark, but their strides are steady. There is no choice. Hunger does not wait for mercy. The field stretches before you, soil dark and damp under a pale sky. Rows of grain stand uneven, thin stalks swaying weakly in the wind. You kneel, thrusting your hoe into the ground. The resistance of the earth bites into your shoulders. Lift, strike, turn. The rhythm settles into your bones, a pattern so familiar it feels carved into you. The smell of soil rises sharp and almost comforting. At least the earth still answers your hand, even if death lingers in the air. But something is different this year. The village feels emptier. There are fewer backs bent beside you, fewer voices calling across the rows. The plague has taken too many, and the ones who remain must work twice as hard. You notice gaps in the line of workers, spaces where friends once laboured, now silent. A chill runs through you. Their absence is as loud as any cry. Yet here lies a strange twist. With fewer hands, your value grows. The lords, once quick to dismiss you as replaceable, now watch more carefully. Rumours drift through the air like pollen. Peasants demanding higher wages, some even granted better food or cloth. The thought makes you smile grimly. Imagine that. The poor with bargaining power. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the true beginning of peasant resistance, or whether rebellion always smouldered, waiting for the plague to fan it into flame. But for you, kneeling in the mud, the change feels real, as solid as the blister forming on your palm. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow. The sun is barely past its climb, yet your shirt clings to you already, heavy and damp. A jug of water hangs at your side, the liquid stale, tasting faintly of iron. You gulp it anyway, grimacing at the metallic tang. Across the field someone coughs, deep and ragged. Heads turn briefly, then quickly bend back to work as though ignoring the sound might silence it. You know better. Every cough is another stone dropped into the pit of fear you carry inside. Still, work goes on. You tie bundles of grain, the rough stalks scratching your skin. The air hums with small noises, the scrape of hose, the grunt of effort, the distant caw of crows circling hungrily overhead. Even the birds seem to sense the abundance of death. A bell tolls faintly from the village, though you can't tell if it calls to prayer or mourns another funeral. These days, it feels like the same thing. By midday, exhaustion weighs on you like a second body. You lean on your hoe, squinting at the sun glaring down through hazy clouds. Sweat trickles into your eyes, stinging, and you wipe it away with a filthy sleeve. A neighbour mutters about bad air, tying a scrap of cloth over his nose and mouth as if it might keep death out. You smirk quietly, though part of you wonders whether you should do the same. In desperate times, even the smallest illusion feels like armour. And then there are stranger rumours still. A man in the next village swears he rubbed garlic on his boots and never once fell ill. Another insists vinegar painted on door frames wards off the sickness. You shake your head, but in your heart, you file the ideas away. You've seen worse superstitions take root. If death keeps circling, you might try garlic yourself, even if it only keeps away neighbours instead of disease. As the afternoon drags on, the rhythm of work steadies you. Each stroke of the hoe is a promise. Food for tomorrow, survival for another day. Yet shadows creep in at the edges of your mind. You imagine whole fields abandoned if more labourers fall, crops rotting where they stand, weeds reclaiming furrows. Nature waits patiently, eager to take back what little humans carved. Already, thistles sprout where neighbours once tended. You picture wild dogs prowling the empty lanes, birds nesting in rafters of deserted huts. Evening comes slowly, golden light spilling across the fields. The workers gather their tools, shoulders bent, steps dragging. Some exchange words about wages, hushed, cautious, but with a spark of daring you've never heard before. They speak of lords forced to bargain, of families eating better than ever despite the plague. It sounds almost absurd, this idea of opportunity blooming in death's shadow. But you feel the truth of it pressing at the edges of your life, like a door creaking open. Back in the village square the talk continues. Men and women huddle in small knots, voices low. Some whisper about moving to empty land, about claiming houses left behind. Others warn that the lords will never allow it, that punishments will be harsh. You listen, weighing every word. It is dangerous to hope, but harder still not to. At last you return home. The sun has dipped, and smoke curls lazily from hearths. Inside, your family waits, bowls of thin porridge steaming faintly. The taste is bland, barely more than water and oats, but you swallow greedily, each spoonful a small victory. Your muscles ache, your hands blister, yet your mind buzzes with restless thought. The plague has brought sorrow, hunger, and fear. But in its shadow something stirs, an unspoken chance that the poor might finally hold more than scraps. Perhaps tomorrow will bring punishment, or perhaps it will bring change. For now, you lie down on the straw, your siblings' breaths warm against your cheek, and let yourself imagine a world where your labour earns more than survival. The bell tolls at dawn again, a sound so familiar now that you wake expecting it. Each clang rolls through the misty air like a warning, deep and heavy, rattling your chest. You pause, listening to the echoes fade, and you know another soul has slipped away. The church bell has become the heartbeat of the plague, marking not hours but losses. You cross yourself quickly, whispering words your mother taught you when you were small, words that feel thinner every time you repeat them. Still, you cling to them, because letting go would feel like stepping naked into a storm. Faith has always been the thread stitching your days together. In your village, religion is not something you choose. It is the air you breathe, the water you drink, the rhythm of every season. The church squats in the middle of the square, its rough stone walls leaning with age, its roof patched with wood so weathered it looks ready to collapse. Yet it is the strongest building you know, and the poor crowd inside it like moths to a lantern. The flickering candles paint the cracked plaster walls with trembling shadows, and for a moment you believe light itself can fight darkness. You step through the heavy door and incense greets you like a wall. The sweet smoke curls upward toward rafters blackened with age, battling in vain against the stench of sweat and sickness. People press shoulder to shoulder, poor folk in rough wool, their faces hollow and pale. You squeeze into a bench, knees knocking against your neighbours, and bow your head. The priest begins his chant, Latin words rolling out like a river you cannot follow. You don't understand them, but the rhythm, the tone, the rising and falling waves, it feels like a shield woven out of sound. Your hands clutch a small wooden cross, rough and splintered from years of touch. You hold it so tightly your knuckles whiten. Beneath your breath you whisper prayers in plain words. Protect us, spare us, let this day pass without fever. You pray for your family first, for the neighbours who share your food when hunger grows sharp, even for the animals sleeping in your hut whose warmth keeps you alive at night. You even find yourself praying for strangers, because if the plague ends with them, perhaps it spares you too. Still, a nagging thought hums in the back of your mind. Does God listen more closely to the rich? The Lords pay for golden chalices and painted icons, while you kneel in rags. You shake the thought away, ashamed, but it hovers like a shadow you cannot chase. Faith is supposed to comfort, yet sometimes it feels like another burden you must carry. The priest's voice grows stronger, warning that the sickness is God's punishment for sin. His words strike hard. Greed, pride, lust, sloth. You bow your head lower, though you wonder, what sin can a starving child commit to deserve this? Historians still argue whether priests truly comforted their flock or deepened the terror. But for you in this moment, both are true. Fear coils around your ribs, yet hope flickers too, small as a candle flame. Around you, villagers clutch their own relics, rosaries of cheap beads, tiny bones of saints in pouches, scraps of cloth blessed on holy days. You've heard strange tales spreading through nearby towns, of mothers rubbing garlic on their children's foreheads to keep away evil spirits, of fathers carving crosses into their doors, of women boiling herbs gathered on Midsummer's Eve and drinking the bitter brew as if faith could be swallowed. None of it feels ridiculous anymore. In a world where the air itself seems poisoned, every charm is worth trying. You remember seeing flagellants once, passing through muddy roads, men in white tunics stained with red, lashing their own backs until blood streamed. They chanted as they walked, voices hoarse, eyes wild with feverish belief. Some villagers whispered that their pain would draw God's pity. Others muttered that it only invited more wrath. You had stood frozen at the sight, torn between horror and awe. The memory returns now, unbidden, as you kneel in the smoky church. The mass ends with the priest lifting a wafer high, his voice trembling as he begs God for mercy. Candles flicker, the flames bowing as if to the plea. People shuffle forward to touch the altar, to drop coins into the wooden box to light their own candles. Some weep openly, tears streaking dirt-stained cheeks. You remain seated a moment longer, staring at the cross in your hand. You want to believe it carries power. You need to believe it, because if it does not, then nothing stands between you and the grave. Outside, the churchyard is crowded with whispers. Women murmur prayers while children chase each other between the graves, their laughter strangely out of place. Men stand in small knots, debating whether sin or stars, demons or bad air carry the sickness. No one knows, but everyone speaks with certainty. You walk among them quietly, tracing the shape of the cross over your chest again and again, as though drawing it enough times might build a wall around you. When you return home, you place the cross above your bed of straw. The children trace its shape with small fingers, repeating words half remembered from Mass. Their voices are thin, uncertain, but the sound comforts you. Faith becomes not just belief, but ritual. Crossing yourself before eating, whispering prayers before sleep, pressing your hand to wood before stepping outside. Each act is a thread, fragile but binding you together. That night, as wind rattles the thatch and smoke curls lazily in the dim firelight, you pray once more. You speak slowly, words steady like the rhythm of breathing. Keep us safe, give us strength, carry us through. The darkness presses close, but the whisper of prayer stretches further, like a candle's glow pushing against endless night. You close your eyes with faith wrapped around you like a thin blanket. It may not be enough to stop the plague, but it is enough to let you rest. The night is restless again. Coughs echo through the lane, rising and falling like waves, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but never far enough. You lie awake on the straw bed, staring at the dark beams overhead, feeling each sound scrape against your nerves. When morning comes, you rise with stiff limbs and hollow eyes. The air feels heavy, as if the dawn itself carries disease. You breathe cautiously, half expecting death to slip into your lungs with every inhale. For people like you, survival is no longer about strong backs or steady hands. It has become a strange game of charms, concoctions and rituals, each more desperate than the last. Real physicians, if they appear at all, are called to manor houses summoned by silver. Their bird-like masks and leather gloves are sights you know only from rumour. The poor must make do with whatever wisdom can be pieced together from scraps of memory, superstition, and sheer fear. At sunrise, the old woman who lives at the edge of the lane presses a clove of garlic into your palm. "Tie it around your neck," she commands. Her voice is brittle as dry wood, yet sharp with authority. The smell will keep the plague away. You loop the bulb onto a thin cord and hang it around your neck. Its weight is nothing, but the smell is sharp, almost violent, burning your nose. Still, you clutch it tightly when a man coughs behind you, as though this stinking talisman could shield you from invisible death. Later, you pass a neighbour who swears by onions. She sets them in corners of her hut, sliced open to drink the poison in the air. You picture the onion sucking sickness into its pale flesh, swelling like a sponge. Part of you scoffs, but hunger bites too fiercely to waste food on magic. Every onion usually ends up in the pot, yet part of you wonders if losing one might buy life. The lanes grow stranger by the day. Families burn foul-smelling mixtures of herbs, resin and dung, waving smoke into every crack of their homes. The air thickens until your eyes sting and your throat burns. You cough hard, but people insist the stench drives away death. Another neighbour smears pigeon droppings on her arms, muttering about balancing the humours. The sight turns your stomach, but fear makes even filth look like medicine. Historians still argue whether these practices had any real effect, or whether they only gave people a way to feel less powerless. You cannot measure unseen poisons, cannot know what truly works. But when you live one cough away from disaster, every ritual feels like a shield, however thin. Rumours spread faster than the plague itself. Vinegar baths cleanse the body, some claim. Others whisper that carrying a dried frog in your pocket offers perfect protection. You laugh at first, but your laughter dies when you see a boy clutching one in his small hand, his face fierce with belief. Perhaps the frog is powerless, but perhaps the boy's conviction is not. Hope can be armour too. You try herbs yourself. Bitter sage leaves, chewed until your tongue goes numb. Rosemary rubbed into your sleeves, leaving you trailed by its sharp scent all day. The taste is awful, yet you force it down, imagining it burning sickness before it takes root. For a few moments the illusion feels like strength. The church joins in the fight. After Mass, the priest sprinkles holy water over the crowd. Droplets fall onto bowed heads and lifted faces like rain. Children giggle at the surprise. Mothers weep. Fathers grip their caps tightly. You tilt your face up, letting the cool water strike your cheeks, telling yourself each drop is a shield hammered from heaven. At the marketplace, remedies sell as quickly as food. A woman hawks bone charms, claiming they belong to saints. A man offers little pouches of dried flowers, promising they purify the air. You touch them briefly, tempted, but your coins are too few. Bread fills bellies. Charms feed only hope. Still you walk away glancing back, wishing hope could be bought as cheaply as rye. By afternoon, the smoke of purifying fires thickens. It rolls through the village in grey waves, seeping into every hut. Chickens sneeze, dogs paw at their noses, and children cough until their eyes water. Yet no one dares complain. Better to choke on smoke than choke on plague, they say. The smell of resin, garlic and sweat becomes the perfume of survival, sharp and bitter, clinging to everything. As dusk falls, you retreat to your hut. The garlic bulb still bounces against your chest, stubborn and sharp. You take an onion, precious though it is, and place it by the door. You whisper a prayer as you set it down. Your children watch silently, wide-eyed, reflecting the firelight. No one mocks, no one questions. In times like these, even a vegetable can become sacred. You tuck them into blankets thin as paper, then lie down yourself. The straw pricks your back. The hearth crackles softly, smoke curling up into the low rafters. The garlic smell clings to your nose, sharp as ever. You clutch the bulb in your hand, rough skin scraping your fingers, and close your eyes. Perhaps garlic cannot fight death. Perhaps onions cannot drink poison, nor herbs chase sickness. But the acts matter because they let you believe. Belief itself is a medicine, even if it cures nothing but despair. In a world where fear spreads faster than fever, even a foul-smelling clove or a bitter mouthful of sage gives you the courage to face one more day. You wake before the bell tolls, heart already racing, as if your body has learned to anticipate sorrow before the sound even strikes. The hut is still wrapped in shadows, the air stale with smoke from last night's fire. You hear the soft breathing of your children, the faint rustle of straw as they shift in their sleep. For a fleeting moment you pretend this is an ordinary morning, but then you catch it. The dull creak of a cart rolling over rutted ground, the muttered voices of men, and the unmistakable thud of shovels sinking into earth. The grave diggers are at work again. Stepping outside, the dawn greets you not with freshness, but with the sour, heavy smell of decay mingled with smoke. A cart rattles past, its wheels clogged with mud, the canvas covering its cargo slipping loose. A pale arm dangles free, limp as cloth, before a gloved hand shoves it back beneath the shroud. Your stomach turns, yet your eyes cannot look away. This is life now, the sight of death paraded down the lane like just another chore. The grave diggers themselves are grim fixtures of your days. Lean, hollow-eyed men, they dig ceaselessly at the village edge, carving trenches deep and wide. The churchyard filled weeks ago. Now pits yawn in the fields like open mouths, swallowing body after body. The dead arrive too quickly for prayer, too many for coffins. The poor are laid in rows, nameless, their lives erased into soil. You wonder if the rich, resting in carved tombs under painted ceilings, can truly sleep easier. Even in death, it seems, class divides remain stubborn. Historians still argue whether these mass burials brought communities together in shared grief or crushed them under the weight of despair. For you, standing on the ridge and watching bodies lowered, it feels like both. On one hand, the poor are bound together, shoulder to shoulder even after death. On the other, the sheer scale steals away dignity, reducing lives to numbers. The gravediggers themselves inspire both awe and suspicion. Some villagers whisper that they are immune, chosen by God to handle death without succumbing. Others insist they spread the sickness, carrying it on their clothes, their shovels, their breath. You don't know which story is truer. You only know they are necessary. Without them, corpses would rot in the lanes, gnawed by dogs and rats. Still, when they pass, you step back, clutching your garlic necklace tighter, as if 2 feet of space might save you. One day, curiosity draws you to follow the cart. You stay far off, but close enough to watch. The men unload bodies with rough efficiency. Some are wrapped in sheets, others barely covered at all, their limbs stiff, their faces slack beneath scraps of cloth. Shovels rise and fall, earth thudding down in heavy clumps. A crow perches on a fence post nearby, its black eyes glittering, waiting for scraps. You chase it off with a stone, heart twisting at the thought of animals feasting where prayers go unsaid. You whisper words under your breath, prayers you know by heart. No priest stands here, no bell tolls for each life ended, only the scrape of metal, the grunt of labour, the distant caw of crows. Still, you cross yourself. Even if God has turned his face away, someone should speak over the forgotten. You pray louder in your head, not for grand miracles, but for rest, for peace, for someone to remember. Back in the village, life limps onward around this constant digging. Women stoop at the stream, scrubbing clothes against stones until their knuckles crack. Children run in the mud, shrieking with laughter, their games eerily close to the passing carts. Men mend fences, patch roofs, swing hoes in fields where weeds threaten to choke the crops. Survival demands routine, even as the world collapses, yet always, eyes flick toward the road when the wheels creak by, and silence hangs heavier than smoke. Rumours coil through the village like smoke. Some say the gravediggers slip coins or jewellery into the pits, treasures buried by desperate families. Children dare each other to sneak to the trenches at night, hunting for luck or gold. You shake your head when you hear it, muttering that even rats have better sense. But you cannot help wondering, if hunger grows sharper, would you stoop to dig where only ghosts should lie? Sometimes strange humour cracks through the gloom. A boy jokes that the gravediggers must have arms like oxen by now, with all that constant shovelling. Another quips that they should open a school. how to dig a hole faster than anyone alive. The laughter is thin, brittle, but it feels good, like stealing a spark from the darkness. Even jokes in times like these are medicine. By dusk, the day's work is done. Fresh mounds of earth rise in neat rows, soft against the fading sky. For a moment, the fields look quiet, almost serene, but you know what lies beneath, and the image clings to your thoughts. As you walk home, you glance over your shoulder, half expecting hands to claw their way free, though you know the dead rest heavy. Still, fear whispers strange things when the light fades. That night, the cart's sound echoes in your mind long after the wheels have stilled. You clutch the garlic bulb against your chest, its smell pungent, stubborn. It feels pitifully small compared to the vast pits you saw, yet you whisper another prayer, softer this time, as though afraid the dead might hear. You pray not just for survival, but for memory, that when your turn comes, someone will whisper over you too. The fire crackles low, the children shift under thin blankets, and you lie awake, watching shadows twitch on the rafters. Tomorrow the bell will toll again. Tomorrow the cart will roll again. But tonight, you hold your family close, whispering their names like charms, reminding yourself that, for now, you are still counted among the living. The cough begins as a whisper, a dry rasp at the back of your loved one's throat. At first you convince yourself it is nothing, dust from the fields, a chill caught in the night air. But the sound grows sharper, more insistent, echoing in the cramped room like a warning bell only you can hear. You glance at the straw pallet where your kin lies, cheeks pale, eyes glazed with fever. The truth settles heavy in your chest. The plague has reached your own bed. Your stomach twists, not from hunger this time, but from dread. Every instinct screams at you to step back, to flee before the sickness takes hold. Yet blood binds you, duty tethers you, and so you kneel beside them, pressing a damp cloth to their brow. The heat of their skin makes you flinch. It is as if a fire smoulders beneath their flesh. The room reeks of sweat and sickness. The thin blanket is damp, the air stifling, the silence broken only by wheezing breaths. You whisper prayers you hardly believe will help, but the words fall from your lips anyway. You recall the priest warning that caring for the sick is a holy duty, a chance to prove devotion. Still, you cannot help but notice how the priests themselves keep their distance, swinging incense instead of risking touch. Historians still argue whether clergy fled more often than they stayed, but in this moment, their absence is what you feel most keenly. You fetch a cup of water, tilting it carefully to your kin's lips. They sip, then cough again, spraying droplets that glisten in the weak light. You turn your head instinctively, guilt stabbing you even as you wipe their mouth. This is the impossible choice you face. Protect yourself and abandon them, or remain and risk your own life. There is no middle path. Neighbours whisper that families who abandon their sick survive more often. Others claim the plague punishes such cruelty. Which is true? No one knows. You only know that leaving would tear you apart long before the sickness could. So you stay. Through the night you sit by their side, changing cloths, shifting their body when the fever makes them restless. You remember how they once laughed around the fire, how their hands guided yours through chores. Those memories fuel your resolve. The plague may take their body, but it cannot erase what they gave you. Morning brings no relief. Their breath rattles, shallow and laboured. You step outside for a moment, gulping fresh air, the chill biting your lungs. The village feels quieter than ever, as if holding its breath with you. Smoke drifts from only a few chimneys now. Many houses remain cold. You catch the eye of a neighbour across the lane. They nod with grim understanding, as if they too keep vigil beside someone fading. No words pass, but the shared burden binds you. Back inside, you try remedies passed along by desperate mouths. You crush garlic and mix it with vinegar, hoping its sharpness will scare the sickness away. The stench fills the room, stinging your eyes, but your kin hardly stirs. Another neighbour suggests tying a charm of herbs above the bed. Sage, rue, maybe a sprig of rosemary if you can find it. You know it is little more than superstition, but you hang the bundle anyway. When death circles so near, even foolish hope feels worth the effort. At one point your kin whispers your name. Their voice is hoarse, a shadow of what it once was, but the sound breaks you. You squeeze their hand, murmuring reassurance you do not believe. You promise they will recover, promise they will sit again by the fire, promise you will not leave. The words taste like lies, yet you say them because silence would be worse. Time blurs. Hours stretch into endless moments of coughing, fevers and prayers. You lose track of whether it is day or night. Hunger gnaws, but you cannot bring yourself to eat. Every sense is attuned to the fragile rise and fall of their chest. When the breath pauses, your own heart stops, only to stutter forward when it resumes. Historians debate whether the plague killed more through the sickness itself or through despair and neglect. You know despair well, but you refuse neglect. You tend them as best you can, even though a voice inside whispers that your care changes nothing. Still, you cling to the smallest signs. A sip of water swallowed, a fever breaking for an hour, a whisper of recognition in clouded eyes. One evening you step outside to fetch more water. The sky is streaked with red, the air sharp with wood smoke. A group of villagers passes by, carrying a cart draped with cloth. You know without asking what lies beneath. The cart creaks, wheels grinding against stone, a dirge louder than any bell. You shudder, then hurry back, clutching the bucket like a talisman. Inside, your kin dozes fitfully. You smooth their hair back, whispering another prayer. Whether they recover or not, you know this vigil has already changed you. You understand now that survival is not just about food or luck, but about the unbearable choice between fear and love. That night, as you drift towards sleep on the stool beside the bed, you realize you've made your choice. You will not abandon them. If the plague claims you both, so be it. But if by some chance they live, you will know you face the darkest hour with loyalty unbroken. And if you live while they do not, at least you will carry no shame. The cough rattles again, pulling you from your thoughts. You steady your hand, press the cloth to their lips and whisper, "I am here." The words are simple, but in a world unravelling they are everything. The laughter of children has grown rare in the village. Once their shouts echoed across the lanes, chasing each other with sticks for swords, rolling hoops made of bent branches, or stealing apples from neighbours' trees. Now the air is quieter, broken only by the occasional cry of a child too young to hide fear. You notice how the smallest shoulders slump lower, how the brightness in their eyes dims beneath shadows no child should carry. Your own children cling closer than before, unwilling to let you stray far from sight. They tug at your sleeve when you step toward the door, as if the moment you vanish, the plague itself will snatch you away. You kneel, ruffling their hair, murmuring that you will return soon, but the reassurance feels thin. They've already seen too many parents leave and not return. Meals have grown scant, and children feel hunger more sharply than the adults. You watch them pick at bowls of nettle broth, too watery to fill their bellies, but they eat with silent determination. Sometimes they ask for bread, their voices trembling with hope. You shake your head gently, offering a smile you do not feel. Their disappointment carves deeper lines into your heart. Hunger is cruelest to the youngest, their bodies still small, their needs constant. Some try to play despite it all. You glimpse a group of children fashioning dolls from scraps of cloth, their tiny hands weaving straw into makeshift toys. Their laughter bursts out sudden and fragile like sparks in the dark. For a moment, you almost believe the world is normal again. But the game soon falters. One child coughs, and the others fall silent, glancing at each other with wide, fearful eyes. The laughter dies as quickly as it began. Historians still argue whether children suffered more from starvation or from fear during the plague years. You suspect both weighed equally. The fear of losing parents, of hearing the wails from neighbours' homes, presses on them like a stone. At night, they curl close to you, whispering questions you cannot answer. Will we live? Will the sickness find us? Will tomorrow be better? You stroke their hair, murmur soothing lies, because silence would only deepen the terror. Quirky remedies often focus on protecting children, as if their innocence alone might be shielded with charms. Some villagers hang amulets carved with crude symbols around little necks. Others smear garlic paste on their chests, claiming it repels the plague like smoke drives off flies. You try not to laugh, though a part of you wants to believe. If a clove of garlic or a carved trinket could spare your children, you would cover them head to toe in such things. One evening you carry your youngest to bed, their body lighter than it should be. Their ribs press against your arm, their face rests against your shoulder, and you feel the fragility of life more keenly than ever. You tuck them beneath a thin blanket, humming a lullaby passed down from your own mother. The melody trembles on your lips, but it soothes them enough to drift into sleep. Watching their chest rise and fall, you pray silently that morning will find them still breathing. The village bears scars too obvious for children to miss. Friends vanish suddenly. Playmates disappear without farewell. A game of tag becomes smaller each week as fewer children join. Sometimes you see them gathering stones, marking a spot in the dirt where a friend once played, as if to hold memory against the wind. Their mourning is quieter than adults, but no less sharp. A strange sight greets you one day. Children chasing butterflies across a field left fallow because its keeper died. The weeds grow tall, buzzing with insects, but the children dart among them, squealing. The field, once a place of labour, has become their playground. You smile despite yourself, reminded that life, even in plague, finds ways to bloom. Yet the smile fades when you recall why the field stands empty. The laughter rings against a backdrop of loss. At night, you gather your children close, telling them stories of saints, heroes, and brave fools who tricked death. They listen wide-eyed, clinging to each word. You weave the tales with extra brightness, because stories are all you can give when food is scarce and safety uncertain. You embellish a knight's courage, a maiden's cleverness, a peasant's luck. You let them believe that even the smallest can outwit darkness. Perhaps, in their dreams, they truly do. One small boy asks why God lets children suffer. The question freezes you. You fumble for an answer, muttering about tests of faith, about rewards in heaven, about mysteries too great for mortals. Yet inside, you feel the same gnawing doubt. You're not alone. Historians note how the plague cracked the faith of many. But to the child's wide eyes, you offer certainty you no longer hold. Protecting them from despair feels as vital as protecting them from the sickness itself. Sometimes you wonder if the children carry more strength than you. They laugh when you cannot. They play when you despair. They cling to hope with tiny fists even as the world crumbles. Perhaps their resilience is not ignorance but defiance, the refusal to bow completely to fear. Watching them, you feel a fragile courage stir in yourself. As the candle burns low, you tuck them in again, brushing dirt from their cheeks, kissing their brows. The room is small, the air heavy, but in this narrow space you carve a pocket of peace. You whisper good night, promising you will be there when they wake. Whether the plague keeps that promise is beyond you, but tonight for their sake you speak it as truth. The youngest sighs in their sleep, murmuring a wordless dream. You smile faintly, exhaustion pulling at your limbs. Tomorrow will bring hunger again, and fear, and perhaps loss. But for now, you listen to the quiet breaths of children who still dream, and you let that sound steady you against the storm. The market square is no longer the heart of the village, but its raw wound, exposed and tender. You step carefully onto its cobblestones, clutching the small purse at your belt as though it were a fragile egg. The air smells of smoke, sour sweat, and the sharp tang of vinegar, poured over coins by merchants who believe it keeps death away. The chatter you once knew, the laughter, the arguments over fair weights, all of it has thinned into murmurs punctuated by coughs. Every sound feels strained, as though the people themselves fear speaking too loudly might draw the plague's attention. Half the stalls stand empty, their wooden frames leaning like skeletons abandoned after a feast. Some sellers have fled, others lie in the churchyard. Those who remain guard their goods fiercely. Bread is displayed in hardened lumps, onions shriveled and spotted, dried fish curled stiff as wood. You scan the pitiful offerings, your mouth already watering at the mere sight of anything edible. You approach a stall where a weary woman tends loaves stacked like bricks. She eyes you with suspicion, perhaps noting the hollows under your cheekbones. 3 coins for 1, she mutters, voice flat. 3! You nearly laugh, remembering when such a loaf cost less than a single coin. Yet you do not laugh, because hunger has no humour left in it. Instead, you beg. 2 coins, and this scrap of wool cloth you offer, holding out the frayed piece you tucked away for barter. She hesitates, glances at the rag, and finally slides 1 loaf across, muttering about her own starving children. The bread is small, sour-smelling, but you cradle it as though it were gold. Around you, the square hums with desperation. A man argues loudly with a grain seller, his voice hoarse. I gave you 4 chickens last week, now you demand 6 for half the grain. The seller shrugs, unmoved. A quarrel breaks into shoving, and soon a sack splits open, spilling kernels across the dirt. People dive to the ground like scavenging birds, scooping handfuls of grain into their skirts, ignoring dust and boot prints. You stand frozen, torn between pity and envy, until the last kernel vanishes. Salt has become more precious than silver. At another stall you see a girl bartering with trembling hands, offering her worn shoes for a fist-sized lump wrapped in cloth. Her mother nods grimly, accepting the trade. Bare feet can endure, but without salt no meat or fish can be kept. You swallow, remembering when salt was a mere pinch in soup. Now it feels like survival itself. Historians still argue whether scarcity came from broken trade routes, or from fear of carrying goods through sickly lands, but to you it makes little difference. Whether by greed, mismanagement, or simple terror, the result is the same. Empty bellies. A strange figure calls out near the well. hawking charms instead of food. Herbs to cleanse the air, bones to keep away the Black Death, he cries, waving little bundles of sage tied with string. Some shake their heads, yet others pay with coins or scraps, desperate for anything that promises safety. You almost scoff, but a part of you aches to believe. If a pouch of dried weeds could truly shield your children, you would give twice the price. You pass by an older man kneeling before a stall of apples gone soft with rot. He picks through them carefully, choosing one that's only half spoiled. The seller demands a coin. The old man hesitates, then pulls from his pocket a small carved whistle, polished smooth from years of use. "It was my grandson's," he whispers, "but he is gone." The whistle changes hands for the apple, and you feel your throat tighten. The plague takes not only lives but heirlooms, memories, the small things that once made life sweet. Quirky rumours buzz in the air along with the bargaining. Some claim that eating raw onions wards off infection. Others swear by chewing cloves if one can find them. You hear someone mutter that touching bread baked with holy water makes you immune. The claims mingle with the cries of merchants, weaving a tapestry of hope and hunger. Coins clink in your purse, too few. You weigh every choice like a judge at trial. Bread for today, or salt for the future. A turnip for soup, or a scrap of dried fish for strength. Each decision feels cruel because you cannot choose all. At last you settle for the loaf already won, and a handful of onions, their skins papery and thin. Your stomach growls at the thought of soup, and you clutch the goods tightly, as if the market itself might snatch them away. Leaving the square, you keep your cloak drawn close. Children's eyes follow you from doorways, hollow and bright with hunger. You do not quicken your pace, but you grip the bread tighter. Hunger makes thieves of even the innocent, and you cannot risk the loss. Still, you cannot bring yourself to hate them. If your own children stared so, you would understand. On the way home, you pass a shuttered stall. Flies buzz around a basket of pears, left to rot by a seller who never returned. You hesitate, then pluck one, bruised and soft, wiping away the worst spots with your sleeve. The sweetness will be fleeting, but it is sweetness nonetheless. You tuck it into your bundle, feeling oddly triumphant. When you finally step inside your own hut, your children rush to greet you. Their eyes widen at the sight of the bread. You tear it apart, dividing crust from crumb, and their hands snatch pieces eagerly. Even sour and hard, it tastes heavenly to them. The onions go into a pot of boiling water, their sharpness filling the room with a smell that, for once, makes mouths water instead of retch. As they eat, you sit back, watching the lines of tension ease from their faces. For tonight, hunger loosens its grip. Tomorrow, you will return to the battlefield of the market, armed only with scraps and hope. Survival has become a daily gamble, one measured not in victories but in crumbs. Yet tonight you count those crumbs as blessings. The walls between houses feel thinner than ever, as if every cough, every hushed argument, every whispered prayer slips through the plaster and lodges in your ribs. You stand in your doorway and listen. Someone quarrelling softly over a sack of barley, a child hiccuping into a sleeve, a cartwheel squeaking like an exhausted old man. The village has contracted not only in size but in touch. People keep their distance, conversations shorten, and the space that once separated neighbours grows wider with suspicion. You remember Marta's nettle tea and the gravedigger's steady labour. Those memories warm you and worry you at once. Yes, that garlic bulb is still in your pocket. Don't pretend you threw it away. It's clingy, like bad advice. There is a hard fact stitched into everything now. The Black Death took an estimated 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's people. The number feels abstract until you count missing faces at the well and empty benches at the alehouse. Historians still argue whether that demographic blow caused immediate social collapse, or whether communities adapted and invented new rules to keep life running. For you, the answer matters less than the effect. You have fewer hands to help, and every act of aid becomes a serious calculation. Some kindnesses arrive like contraband, unexpected and precious. You find a bowl of stew at your threshold, a rough spoon stuck in it and a smear of onion on the rim. Whoever left it did not knock. They knew you might be afraid to open the door. You eat in the corner and feel gratitude mixed with embarrassment, tasting both salt and the neighbour's courage. Survival becomes a ledger of tiny debts. You give a day's labour now. You might be owed a night of watch later. If bookkeeping paid well in your village, everyone would have a manor. Not all trades are honourable. In the market, you watch a woman hand over a silver brooch, polished from generations, for a sack of grain. She fingers the brooch as if it were a memory and then lets it go. Later that week, someone ransacks a widow's storehouse in the night. The thief is caught. His hands are bruised, his mouth full of excuses. People gather to hiss and hand down judgment. You feel the tug of both pity and anger. Would you steal to feed hungry children? Would you punish the thief, or the world that made him? Light joke. If apologies were bread, we'd all be feasting. Communal life mutates into pragmatic ritual. Men bang pots at dusk. Part superstition, part effort to scare rats from grain. Women organise staggered trips to the well, carrying water in shifts so as not to cluster and cough on one another. Neighbours swap the oddest currencies. A patch of cloth, a night's watch, a story for a loaf. Historians still argue whether these adaptations were spontaneous improvisations or led by a handful of local elders, but either way, cooperation translates directly into survival. You start keeping track of who still fetches water for others, who bakes extra on market days, and who watches your children without asking for payment. That information, you realise, is as valuable as a sack of barley. Quirky customs spread like a second crop. Some people sprinkle salt across their thresholds, others hang a sprig of rue above the door. One farmer swears that slapping a bit of lard on the window kept miasma at bay. Ridiculous, maybe, but he swears by it, and his family is still alive. You roll your eyes at the superstition and hide a pinch of salt in your pocket anyway because, let's be honest, an extra pinch of security never hurt. Joke, if superstition grew in the fields, we'd have a bumper crop of hope. Betrayal is quieter and thus bitterer. Doors once open to you are now barred. A neighbour who used to exchange herbs and gossip now walks the other way, eyeing you the way one eyes a leaky pot. Names get scribbled on walls, unclean, and rumour turns into exile. The plague mines reputations as mercilessly as bodies. A smear on a family's name may keep them from receiving help long after coughs stop. You see the logic, and you see the cruelty. Survival sometimes requires choosing who to trust, and once you label someone as dangerous or dirty, that label is hard to erase. Still, there are stubborn sparks of compassion. When Marta's son collapses in the lane, strangers heave and carry him home. Later, an anonymous pot of broth appears at her door. People leave gifts without signatures, a slice of cheese placed on a doorstep at dawn, a cloak tossed over a fence for a neighbour's child. Those small kindnesses function as lighthouses in fog, brief, bright, and able to guide the lost for a moment. You begin to watch for them like a mariner watches lighthouses, subtle, necessary, and sometimes life-saving. By twilight, the ledger of favours and betrayals grows heavy in your thoughts. You tally who owes you, who offers comfort, who hoards. The math is messy, but it is human. You cannot predict who will be your ally in the next crisis, only that the village will keep reweaving itself, sometimes roughly, sometimes beautifully, around whatever resources remain. Historians still argue whether these changes were lasting. Did the plague permanently reshape who held power and who fetched water? But you feel shifts in the small transactions. Who gets the last piece of bread? Who keeps a story alive for future telling? When you finally lie down, tired to the bone, you fold the day's small mercies into your cloak. The pan across the lane clangs again. Somebody's making noise, whether to chase rats, to scare fate, or simply to hear themselves in a quiet night. You smile despite everything. The noise is a proof that the village is still noisy, still stubbornly alive. You close your eyes and for a moment let the ledger rest. Tomorrow you will wake and reckon again, trade some labour, tell a story, maybe steal a glance at that silver brooch. For now you sleep, held between petty betrayals and luminous kindnesses, and decide, quietly, to continue giving a bowl when you can. You hear them before you see them, shoes slapping against stones too large for the feet that wear them, voices pitched somewhere between play and panic. Children drift through the alleys now like lost coins rattling in a purse. Their parents are gone, doors sealed, shutters nailed. No one has space for extra mouths, and yet the mouths remain, wandering with eyes too wide, hands too thin. You catch sight of them when you head to the well. A boy with a crooked cap leading two smaller girls, all three clutching each other's sleeves like a rope. The older one pretends confidence, but you see the way his eyes dart, checking shadows for threats. He tries to look like a shepherd. He looks like a child who misses breakfast. Orphans are multiplying, though no one keeps count. Historians estimate hundreds of villages across Europe ended up with more children than caretakers, and still they debate whether local lords took responsibility or left charity to neighbours and monasteries. For you, the debate is not academic. It is standing right there in the mud, staring at your crust of bread. You hesitate. What do you do with them? Feed them once and they return tomorrow. Ignore them and you carry their faces into your sleep. Either way the weight presses. One day, a small girl lingers near your doorway. Her hair is tangled into knots, her tunic too thin for the wind. She does not speak. She just stares at the crust in your hand, then at the ground, then back again. You sigh and break the bread, handing her the smaller piece. She runs off, but not before her fingers brush yours, cold as stones in the river. Later you scold yourself, one piece of bread gone, and no one to replace it. But when you lie down that night, the memory of her small hand warms you in a way stew cannot. Cheeky thought, congratulations, you've just been mugged by a 5-year-old without her saying a word. Not every child is shy. Some have turned scavenger, clambering into abandoned cottages to dig for dried beans or old apples. You watch them through slats, nimble, reckless, more fox than human. Once you catch 2 boys trying to prize nails from your fence, not for mischief, but because nails fetch barter value now, you shoo them off, half amused, half angry. Later, you find one rusty nail tucked inside your own pocket. Proof you're no less desperate than they are. Quirky fact. Some towns even paid children to chase away rats, as if tiny hands could outwit vermin. The irony is sharp. Rats, fleas, and orphans running the same alleys, none invited, all impossible to banish. Sometimes kindness surprises you. Marta, who has barely enough stew for her own brood, lets 3 orphans sleep by her hearth. She grumbles the whole time about fleas, about noise, about stolen scraps, but she never actually sends them away. You catch her humming as she braids one girl's hair. Human hearts have loopholes larger than law. Historians still argue whether medieval society softened toward orphans during the plague or hardened into cold pragmatism. But standing here, you suspect both are true. Mercy given in moments, hardness in policy. The church tries to respond, though its priests are thin and tired. You hear of pest houses where children are gathered, given thin broth, and left to survive or not. Some claim monasteries take in dozens, though rumour also says monks prefer healthy children who can labour. You cannot tell which is true. All you know is that the bells toll more often for the young, their short names etched hurriedly on parish lists. One quirky story drifts through lanes. A group of orphans in Lübeck supposedly crowned a rag doll as their queen and paraded it around, demanding bread. Was it real? Scholars doubt, but you like to imagine children claiming scraps of power, however odd. Your own conscience wrestles you daily. One morning, the boy with the crooked cap returns, holding the smaller girl by the hand. He does not beg. He just stands there, his eyes asking what his mouth cannot. You have half a cabbage, a bit of barley. Your family is thinner than last month. The scales of survival tilt cruelly. Your child or someone else's. You cut the cabbage in quarters and hand him one. He nods, solemn, as if sealing a contract. Later you hear the girls laughing, gnawing cabbage leaves and pretending they are cakes. The sound is too bright for the grey street. Joke, if cabbage were cake, medieval children would be bakers. There are darker tales too. Some children vanish. No one knows if they died alone or were taken in secret. Rumours grow sharp. Witches, slavers, or simply hunger. You pray those stories are false, but silence in alleys makes you suspect otherwise. When you see a small shoe abandoned near the ditch, your heart twists. Was it dropped in play, or left by someone who never returned? You look away quickly, because looking too long makes your knees weak. Yet children adapt in strange, resilient ways. You see them invent games with stones and sticks, laughter echoing like rebellion against despair. They mimic adults. One girl scolds another in a perfect imitation of the market hag, finger-wagging, voice cracking. Even in rags they chase one another, dust rising in little clouds. The sight unsettles you, joy perched on the edge of starvation. But maybe that is the secret. Play as survival. Historians still argue whether communities learned resilience from children or merely tolerated their noise. But watching them now, you sense they are teaching you something. Life insists, even in alleys. When you lie down at night, their faces hover. You ask yourself, tomorrow, will you give bread again, or shut the door? Will mercy shorten your days or lengthen your soul? No answer comes. You fall asleep to the sound of a child's laughter carried faintly down the lane, a sound both lighter and heavier than the plague itself. The market no longer smells the same. Once it carried hints of roasted meat, damp wool, and herbs crushed underfoot. Now it reeks of desperation. Onions rotting in baskets, grain spilled and left for rats, sweat thick in the air as people bargain with the intensity of gamblers. You step into the square and realise quickly that coins have lost their weight. The silver pieces in your pouch clink uselessly. Merchants wave them away with a weary shake of the head. Hunger, not currency, dictates trade. You approach a stall where a woman has 3 loaves, small and cracked. A man offers 2 silver pennies. She refuses, folding her arms tight. Another man steps forward and places a cured ham on the counter. Her eyes soften. The trade is done. Bread for meat, no coin in sight. The lesson is simple. Shiny metal cannot fill a stomach, but food can. Historians still argue whether the plague accelerated Europe's shift toward barter, or merely revealed how fragile coin economies were. Yet for you there is no debate. The market proves it daily. You pull out a skein of wool, rough but clean. The baker's wife eyes it and shakes her head. Then you offer a spool of thread, small, almost laughable. She hesitates, then nods, sliding you half a loaf. Thread, not silver, earns you food. You tuck it into your satchel, muttering a dry joke to yourself. Congratulations, you've just stitched your way to dinner, and if you had more thread, you'd be a king. Around you, trades grow stranger. One man swaps a goat for 3 sacks of onions. Another exchanges a bed frame for a barrel of ale. A child offers her shoes for a pot of stew. The merchant frowns but accepts. People barter everything: labour, tools, even songs. You overhear a fiddler promise to play outside a merchant's stall for a week in exchange for flour. Quirky, maybe, but music can draw customers, and customers bring goods. The value of things has turned slippery, bending to hunger's command. You notice a stall selling herbs. Once they were luxury items, now they are talismans. Rue, sage, garlic, all carry inflated worth because people believe they guard against plague. You trade a strip of cloth for 2 wilted sprigs of rosemary, telling yourself the scent will keep miasma away. Do you believe it? Not really. But belief itself has value in a market where fear is currency. Joke, if paranoia could be bottled, it would outsell ale. The coin economy staggers along in certain corners. The Lord's tax collector still demands payment in pennies, insisting that silver keeps order. Yet even he accepts chickens when pressed, clucking loudly as if to disguise the compromise. You wonder how long lords can cling to coin when their tenants barter behind their backs. Historians still argue whether this era marked a true turning point toward a mixed economy, but you know firsthand, when death looms, survival counts in bread, not in minted faces. The market is smaller too. Fewer stalls, fewer voices. Whole families who once sold cheese or cloth are gone. Empty spaces gape between wagons like missing teeth. Yet the noise remains sharp. Barter is not gentle. People shout, argue, wave their arms. A man refuses to trade grain for firewood, and his neighbour calls him a miser. Another insists her salt is worth 2 hens, not 1, and a circle of bystanders jeers until she relents. Deals are public theatre. Every exchange is a performance of desperation and pride. Sometimes the market feels like a game of chance. You carry your meagre goods, an old pot, a bundle of nettles, a worn cloak, and you gamble what they might fetch. Will someone trade bread? Or will you walk home empty-handed? The stakes are cruel. Lose too often, and your stomach growls loud enough to shame you. Half joke. The only thing thinner than the bread is your patience. Yet even in chaos, patterns emerge. Labour becomes a commodity. A farmer offers half a sack of grain if you'll guard his field at night. A widow promises a stew in exchange for help patching her roof. You barter sweat and hours as if they were coins. The strange thing is how intimate these trades feel. Your time for their meal, your back for their shelter. You realise that in a world where money falters, community becomes currency. One quirky detail you overhear. In some towns, people carve tally sticks, splinters of wood notched with promises. One half stays with the lender, the other with the borrower. When they reunite, the notches prove the debt. You wonder if that could work here, though most villagers scoff at record-keeping. For now, trust or fear of betrayal serves as ledger enough. The market teaches harsh lessons too. You watch a boy hand over a carved whistle for a handful of beans. The merchant snatches it quickly, knowing the boy's hunger leaves no room for hesitation. Later you hear the whistle's shrill note from the man's stall, and the sound pierces your heart. Objects once filled with memory become mere tokens for trade. The Black Death doesn't only empty stomachs, it empties meaning from possessions. Still, the market persists. Each week people gather, argue, barter, survive. The square remains a heartbeat, irregular but vital. You stand with your half-loaf, your sprigs of rosemary, and your lighter pouch. The clang of pots, the calls of traders, the whimper of children, all swirl together in a symphony of survival. It is ugly, raw, and oddly beautiful. You realize that even when coins lose shine, people invent new currencies, trust, labor, stories, even a thread of wool. Historians will argue for centuries about economic shifts, but you, standing here with bread in your hand, know one truth. Hunger rewrites the rules faster than kings ever can. As dusk falls, you walk home through the quieter lanes, your bundle smaller than you hoped but heavier than nothing. Tomorrow you will return, gamble again, and maybe trade something you haven't thought of yet. Your skill at mending, your knack for telling stories, your willingness to stand guard. Whatever it takes, because the market may look different, but it still beats like a pulse, and as long as it beats, you're not yet gone. The church bells toll at dawn, a sound once comforting but now heavy as stone. Each strike rolls across the village like a warning, calling you and your neighbours to gather. You step through the crooked door frame into air thick with candle smoke, beeswax mingling with the sour odour of too many bodies pressed close. Once this space promised solace. Now it thrums with both faith and fear, each heartbeat sounding like a prayer too hurried, too desperate. You shuffle onto a bench beside Marta, her hands trembling as she clutches a rosary carved from bone. Around you, people kneel, murmur, cross themselves again and again as if repetition alone might build a wall between them and death. The priest's voice rises, cracked from overuse. He assures you that God's mercy is vast, that repentance may shield the faithful. But you notice how his eyes flick to the doorway whenever someone coughs. Even he, draped in vestments, fears contagion. Historians still argue whether the plague deepened devotion or seeded doubt, and in this dim church you see both truths colliding. A young woman wails openly, begging saints for her children's safety. An older man mutters darkly that prayers have done nothing, that God has turned his back. The two sit less than a yard apart, yet their faiths diverge like roads splitting in fog. Quirky details slip into worship too. A rumour spreads that ringing bells drives away the pestilence, so acolytes pull ropes until their palms blister, letting the clang echo long into the night. Some villagers tie herbs to the doorposts of the church, believing rosemary or rue will cleanse the air as prayers rise. You find it almost comic. God's house dressed like a sick room. Half joke. Maybe heaven runs on herbal incense now. Still, fear magnifies devotion. Pilgrims stagger into town, whipping their backs until skin peels, convinced that suffering will earn divine pity. The children watch with wide eyes, half horrified, half enthralled by the spectacle. You shiver, wondering if penance like this draws grace or merely blood. Historians debate whether such movements strengthened the church's grip or exposed its fragility. But to you the image lingers, faith as self-inflicted pain. The church fills with rituals old and new. Mass continues, though more rushed. Priests sprinkle holy water over crowds, droplets falling like rain. Families clutch relics, splinters of wood, fragments of cloth, sold at dear price by travelling merchants who insist they are from saints. You watch one woman kiss a shard of bone, her lips trembling. Is it holiness, or just another barter of fear? Joke, if relic sales were a market, they'd make better profit than onions. Yet beneath the chants lies unease. You hear whispers that God is punishing humanity for pride, greed, or secret sins. Some argue Jews poisoned wells. Others claim witches consort with demons. A widow is eyed suspiciously after her family dies last. People mutter that she must have struck a bargain with darkness. Faith provides comfort, yes, but also fuels blame, shaping enemies where none existed. You kneel and try to pray, words stumbling. You ask for bread, for safety, for your children's laughter tomorrow. But even as you whisper, doubt creeps in. If God listens, why so many graves? If his mercy is infinite, why do bells toll every day? Your rosary beads slide through your fingers like pebbles, grounding you, yet not silencing the question. Faith feels like a rope, sometimes strong, sometimes fraying, and still the church remains a gathering place. Even the doubtful come, because where else can you turn? The square may feed your stomach, but here you feed your soul, or at least keep loneliness at bay. Songs rise, cracked but steady, Latin phrases most cannot understand yet cling to like charms. The rhythm soothes, even if meaning falters. For a moment in shared sound you almost believe again. Quirky moments of humour sneak in too. A child sneezes loudly during a solemn prayer, and half the congregation gasps, crossing themselves in panic. The child just grins, wiping his nose on his sleeve. You bite back laughter. After all, sneezes do not announce doom every time. Sometimes a sneeze is only a sneeze. The tension cracks, if only for a heartbeat. When the service ends, people file out into daylight, faces pale, eyes darting. Some leave with renewed hope, others with heavier doubt. You walk slowly, listening to murmurs, promises to confess more often, vows to fast, fears that perhaps God has abandoned this village altogether. It is a chorus of uncertainty, sung beneath the steady toll of bells. Historians still argue whether the Black Death marked the beginning of decline in unquestioned church authority. You cannot see the future, only this moment, your village caught between belief and despair, incense and whispers. Yet you sense a shift. Faith no longer feels like a blanket, soft and sure, but like a patchwork quilt, full of holes, each person clutching it differently. You pause outside the church, the rosemary sprigs rustling above the door. The air feels no cleaner, but you breathe deeply anyway, as if scent alone could protect you. Behind you, the bells fall silent, and the silence feels heavier still. You realize that faith in this time is not a simple thing. It is a battle, a negotiation between fear and hope. And though you doubt, you return again and again, because in a world unravelling, even frayed faith is something to hold. The lane is quieter than it once was, but somehow children still manage to stuff it full of noise. Their laughter bounces off the stone walls bright and sharp, startling drowsy chickens and making a dog bark from under a cart. You stand in the doorway and watch them sprint past shuttered homes, bare feet slapping dust into little clouds. The sound feels jarringly alive in a village that otherwise hums with whispers of sickness and grief. For a moment, you forget the fresh graves on the hill. Laughter, stubborn and reckless, insists on surviving even when everything else bends toward death. A group of boys gathers around a circle scratched in the dirt. They toss pebbles one by one, aiming for the centre. There is no prize except pride, but pride alone is fierce enough to fuel their shrieks. One boy throws too hard. The stone bounces wide and everyone howls. A girl, smaller than the rest, sends her pebble spinning perfectly into place, and the others cheer, half in admiration, half in mock envy. The game is primitive, yet complete. They need no toys, no coins, only stones and imagination. Historians still argue whether such scraps of play truly ease the burden of plague years. But seeing these bright eyes, you suspect joy itself was the medicine. Songs float through the lane too, odd little rhymes patched together from fear and humour. One child hums about cats chasing rats. Another adds a verse about fleas biting toes. Before long, the whole gang chants it in rhythm, stomping their heels. The rhyme is absurd and slightly eerie, but undeniably catchy. It becomes a chorus, half lullaby, half protest. You find yourself tapping your toe against the step, even as a shiver slides down your spine. Half joke. Congratulations, you've just witnessed the invention of medieval dark comedy. Nearby, a girl cradles a doll sewn from rags. Its face is crookedly stitched, its body lumpy with straw, but she rocks it tenderly and whispers a lullaby older than memory. Another child begs to hold it. She hesitates, then nods. Soon the doll passes hand to hand, each child adding a silly verse. The object is fragile, nothing more than scraps, yet it binds them. For adults, possessions are bartered away in the market, stripped of sentiment. But for children, even a ragged doll becomes treasure, proof that comfort can still exist. At dusk, games shift indoors. You sit by the hearth while your children invent riddles. What has no legs but runs? One asks, eyes alight. You answer, water, with mock solemnity, and they burst into laughter. They craft riddles about smoke, shadows, even the sound of bells. Riddles, rhymes, nonsense verses. They weave a patchwork of sound that covers the silence outside. You marvel at their ability to conjure joy from nothing. Historians still argue whether such memories shaped survival, but your heart insists yes. Joy kept despair from swallowing everything whole. The contrast is brutal. Earlier you walked past the graveyard where mourners keened softly. Now you sit in your cottage hearing your children sing about donkeys stealing cheese. Grief and laughter exist side by side, two notes in the same song. The world is both, always both. Children invent their own protective rituals too. Some skip in circles, convinced spinning confuses plague spirits. Others whistle loudly, declaring rats hate shrill notes. You watch them leap from stone to stone, whistling tunelessly, and can't help but laugh. Their rituals mimic the adults' rosemary sprigs and tolling bells, but with brighter imagination. Joke. If noise really did banish sickness, your village would already be cured by the volume of these kids. The innocence feels fragile. You see how quickly laughter snaps off when someone coughs. One child sneezes and the game freezes. They glance at each other, faces flickering between fear and hope. Sometimes they recover, resuming their stomping chant. Sometimes they scatter home, laughter evaporating like smoke. You ache watching it, wishing you could bottle their joy and uncork it on the darkest nights. Still, joy stubbornly reappears. A neighbour repairs a broken lute with twine, strumming rough tunes that lure children into clumsy dances. Marta's son discovers a hollow log and beats it like a drum, the rhythm rough but infectious. Even weary adults tap their toes while pretending not to smile. Music, ragged and improvised, becomes another form of resistance. One evening you witness a miniature miracle. Children stage a play outside the church steps. They assign roles: a knight, a princess, a monster rat. With a stick for a sword, the knight slays the rat, rescues the princess, and is showered with cheers. Parents clap, a few wiping tears from their eyes. For a fleeting span, the village remembers triumph. It is theatre, yes, but also a wish turned visible, that the monster might one day be defeated. Historians still argue whether art or laughter had any measurable effect on survival. You cannot measure it either, but you see the way shoulders lighten, the way hearts lift, the way your own pulse slows listening to childish songs. Each joke, each riddle, each doll is a stone against the flood. Joy is not an answer, but it is resistance. Later, as night deepens, your children curl into bed, still whispering about who threw the best pebble or who sang the silliest rhyme. You tuck the blanket tighter, smile at their sleepy grins, and feel something rare: hope. The plague rages outside, merciless and unrelenting. Yet here, in these games and songs, you find proof that joy survives. Small, flickering, fragile, but alive. And maybe that is enough to carry you through another dawn. The fields lie quiet, almost too quiet. You step onto the worn path, and the first thing you notice is how the land itself seems to sigh. Tall grasses sway where wheat once lined the furrows, their tips brushing against each other with a soft whispering hiss. The wind smells damp, heavy with the scent of earth left untended, and here and there the faint odour of mould drifts from forgotten haystacks. The world feels half wild, as if nature has been waiting impatiently for its turn to rule again. Tools are scattered like relics of another time. A wooden rake lies with one tine broken, its handle bleached grey by months of sun and rain. A scythe rusts in the ditch, its once sharp edge dulled to nothing. You crouch, brush dirt from its blade, and realise no one has touched it since before the plague swept through. Each abandoned object tells a story of work left unfinished, of hands that will never return to claim them. And yet, despite the desolation, life stirs. A few villagers, gaunt but determined, still rise at dawn. They scatter seed with crooked throws, mend fences with rough knots, chase away crows with stones hurled more in hope than strength. You sometimes join them, your body moving out of habit rather than faith in the harvest. A field that once required 10 men is now tilled by 2, their footprints weaving drunken paths through the soil. The rows bend and twist, like lines written by a tired hand. You wonder if the earth notices, if it misses the precision of the past. Historians still argue whether the labour shortage after the Black Death truly changed the fate of the poor, or whether power merely shifted hands for a time. From where you stand, the answer feels written across every neglected acre. Lords who once demanded obedience now mutter and bargain. They need you more than you need them, though admitting it would curdle their pride. You sense the balance tipping, not in grand proclamations, but in lowered rents, in softer voices, in doors that remain closed instead of summoning you with a barked command. Bargains, too, have changed. A widow promises a sack of barley if someone will patch her leaking roof. A father offers his last goat in exchange for labour to rebuild a collapsed fence. You lend your hands where you can, sometimes trading nothing but time and sweat for a loaf of bread or a warm blanket. Survival becomes a web of exchange, fragile thread stretched thin yet holding firm. You are part of that web now, your worth measured not by coin but by your presence, your willingness, your endurance. Of course, oddities creep in alongside necessity. A boy insists on planting onions in the shape of a cross, convinced that the pattern itself wards off disease. A woman refuses to step into a certain field because she swears the soil there whispers at night. People chuckle at her behind her back, but no one tests the claim. Superstition seeps into farming like rainwater into cracks, filling spaces where knowledge fails. You catch yourself following little rituals too, turning your bread 3 times before eating, whispering a prayer while you tie bundles of sticks. Half the time you know it's nonsense. The other half, you cling to it as if it's all that keeps you alive. Resilience shows itself in unexpected forms. Marta, once thin as a reed, now runs a bakery from her hearth, trading loaves for firewood or wool. The village fiddler, too frail to play anymore, sharpens knives and hoes in return for stew. Children herd sheep across the hillsides, their shouts echoing sharp and bright. One girl, no more than 12, controls a whole flock with nothing but a whistle and her stubborn stance. What looked like desperation months ago now looks like adaptation. Lives warp and reshape, bending to fit the gaps left by loss. Yet grief still clings like mist. Every hedge, every cart, every lane reminds you of someone who once touched it. You walk past a broken wheelbarrow and see the ghost of its owner pushing it, sweat dripping from his brow. The village is a skeleton draped in memory, and you carry those bones with you. But memory does not crush you. Instead, it fuels the determination to continue. The poor do not endure by erasing grief. They endure by carrying it forward, folding it into their labour like flour into dough. At night, the quiet feels different than before. Gone are the songs that once rolled from taverns, the laughter spilling down lanes. Now silence sits heavy but not hopeless. Families gather close, bowls of thin stew shared between too many hands. Stories are told, news of fields exchanged, sometimes a brittle joke tossed into the air to test whether laughter can still exist. It can. The sound is softer now, tinged with sorrow, but it endures. Historians still argue whether the Black Death freed peasants or merely rearranged their chains. You cannot know centuries ahead, but in your village you feel a crack in the old order. Masters now lower their eyes, ask politely, bargain quietly. It may not last forever, but for the first time you are not completely powerless. You think of the children. Their ribs still show, but their voices ring with life. They chase butterflies across fields once heavy with wheat, turning absence into playgrounds. They skip stones across the river where their parents once washed laundry, and the ripples spread wider than you expect. Their laughter, even thin as it is, feels like a declaration. Life continues. Perhaps survival is not measured in the size of the harvest, but in the ability to laugh while planting crooked rows. The plague has scarred everything. It carved wounds into land, into faith, into families. Yet in the scar tissue resilience grows. The poor endure not with triumph, but with quiet persistence. Each patched roof, each loaf baked from meagre grain, each whistle commanding sheep is a testament that survival itself can be victory. As dusk falls, you walk home past the fields. Fireflies blink in the grass like tiny lanterns, careless of history. You pause to watch them, and for the first time in months you feel calm. The plague may return, hunger may bite again, sorrow may sharpen, but tonight you have bread, children, and the knowledge that survival, though ragged, though humble, is survival nonetheless. The morning begins with dampness clinging to your skin. Mist curls low along the hedges, softening the edges of cottages and making the fields look endless. You draw your cloak tighter, the fabric rough and scratchy against your neck, and shift the hoe on your shoulder. The wooden handle creaks like an old bone, reminding you of how many hands it has passed through. Ahead, the land waits. Once ordered and straight, it is now tangled with weeds, the soil broken only by patches of last year's failed grain. You step into the furrow and the earth gives under your heel, spongy with neglect. The smell is sharp, earth mixed with rot, weeds mixing with the faint sweetness of wildflowers that should not even be there. Crows wheel above, their harsh calls echoing like a warning. You bend, run a hand through the dirt, and it clings beneath your nails, clotted and stubborn. The plague did not kill the soil, but it left it wild, as though mocking the absence of those who once commanded it. Work begins in halting rhythm. Your hoe drags crooked line across the ground, the sound a rough scrape softened by the fog. To your right, Marta stumbles forward, her skirt muddied, her breath ragged, yet she does not stop. Beyond her, two boys, barely strong enough to hold their tools, swing clumsily, carving shallow scratches into the furrows. A field that once echoed with 10 or more voices now holds barely 5. Crooked rows stretch out, wavering like a sentence written by someone half asleep. You feel the ache in your shoulders almost immediately, but you grit your teeth. Historians still argue whether the shortage of labour truly freed peasants from their chains, or whether lords merely shifted the weight of their demands. You cannot see centuries ahead, but here, today, the difference is carved into your hands. The manor's messenger arrived only yesterday, not with threats, but with pleading. "Please," he muttered, "the land lies empty. We'll reduce rents, forgive debts, just return." You had never heard such words before, and they ring in your ears even as you strike the soil. The power has shifted, if only by a sliver. The bargaining spreads like wildfire. Marta offers her ox to plough in exchange for bread through winter. You lend 2 days of labour to repair a neighbour's roof, and in return they promise seed for your plot. It is not charity nor obedience, but barter born of necessity. The old order has cracked, and through those cracks new habits grow, fragile but alive. Every handshake feels like defiance against hunger, every crooked furrow like a declaration that the village will not vanish. Quirky habits sneak into the work. One boy insists on planting garlic in circles, claiming it keeps away sickness. A woman sprinkles ash from her hearth into the soil, muttering prayers under her breath. You try not to laugh, but the truth is you follow rituals of your own. 3 times you tap the handle of your hoe before scattering seed, because your grandmother once told you it brings luck. Half of you knows it is nonsense. The other half clings to it like a shield. In this world where plague stole reason, even foolishness feels like comfort. The rhythm of farming returns slowly. At first, silence reigns, broken only by crows. Then, one day, someone begins to hum as they work, low and steady. Another joins, and soon the sound of hoes scraping the ground blends with murmured tunes. By dusk, when tools clatter against stone, voices murmur stories of the day, and the silence no longer feels like emptiness, but like weary companionship. The fields are still ragged, but they are no longer dead. Children become part of the process too. You see them darting between rows, chasing each other, their laughter startling the crows. Once you might have scolded them for ruining the furrows. Now you find yourself watching with a faint smile. Their feet undo some of the day's labour, yes, but their voices stitch hope into the soil. A crooked furrow can be repaired, a laugh lost to silence cannot. At night you return along the path, shoulders sore, palms blistered. The cottages glow faintly, smoke drifting from chimneys again after so many dark months. Inside, bowls of thin stew are passed around, steam carrying the smell of onions and herbs. You dip bread into broth, chew slowly, and let the warmth fill the hollow in your belly. Conversation is quiet, almost reverent. People speak of furrows straightening, of seeds sprouting. No one dares to promise plenty, but even scraps of hope are enough to soften the edges of grief. Fear lingers, though. Every cough at the table stiffens spines. Whispers ripple. What if the plague lies waiting in the soil, ready to bloom alongside the wheat? Some swear rats still carry death in their bellies. Historians still argue about fleas, about air, about divine punishment. But none of those debates quiet the gnawing unease when you hear a sneeze in the night. Fear clings like smoke. You cannot see its source, but it fills your lungs all the same. One evening you pause at the ridge above the fields. Sunlight spills across the furrows, painting them gold. They are not straight, not orderly, not like before, but they are there, row upon row, stubborn lines carved by weary hands. Fireflies begin to spark at the edges, tiny lanterns careless of human sorrow. For the first time in months, you feel the land breathing with you, not against you. The fields may be scarred, the yield uncertain, but each seed buried is more than grain. It is defiance, memory, and fragile hope pressed into the soil. Against hunger, against despair, against the shadow of plague, the act of planting itself becomes a prayer. You straighten, stretch your aching back, and whisper the words your grandmother once told you. The earth remembers. And as the evening deepens, you believe it. Children are everywhere now. For months their voices were absent, swallowed by silence and grief. But little by little they return, as persistent as weeds between stones. You hear them first in the mornings, shrill laughter breaking through the mist. Bare feet slap against packed earth, a rhythm that feels brighter than any church bell. You pause at your work, hoe still in your hands, and listen, realizing how much you missed that sound. The children of survivors carry the plague's shadow without even knowing it. Some grow up in houses half empty, brothers or mothers or cousins gone, their places at the table permanently bare. Yet the children adapt faster than the adults. They dart through abandoned cottages as though they were castles, climb trees that once shaded lost families, turn ruins into playgrounds. Where you see sorrow, they see space. It unsettles you at first. How easily they laugh in the skeleton of your grief, but then you recognize it. Resilience. Childhood does not ask permission to survive. You notice, too, how different these children are from the ones before. They carry more responsibility, as though the plague aged them alongside their parents. A boy of 9 herds sheep with a whistle sharp enough to pierce the hills. A girl of 12 kneads dough with the precision of her grandmother. Children draw water, chop wood, even join in planting. Their small hands blister, but they do not complain. Historians still argue whether labour shortages permanently shifted expectations for children, but you see it here. Necessity shrinks childhood like a wool cloak in rain. At the same time, they invent strange games from scraps of memory. You watch one group line up stones in the shape of a graveyard, chanting as they bury twigs. Another band marches with sticks, pretending to be monks driving out the plague with holy chants, though their songs sound suspiciously like tavern tunes. You laugh softly, half at their boldness, half at the way play transforms horror into ritual. Quirky, yes, but perhaps that is how fear is softened into something bearable. Meals remind you of absence most of all. Children sit at long tables with too few adults. They eat slowly, careful not to spill, as though aware that every grain matters. When the pot is nearly empty, they scrape the sides with solemn diligence. Yet even in hunger, they chatter, swapping jokes, tugging each other's sleeves, filling the gaps with noise adults cannot muster. You find yourself lingering at the table longer, letting their energy soak into your tired bones. One afternoon, while mending a fence, you hear a boy singing. His voice cracks, high and untrained, but the tune carries across the fields. He sings of plague, though in his version rats wear crowns and doctors with bird masks chase them with brooms. You nearly drop your hammer from laughing. Humour, it seems, is their rebellion. Where adults hush and whisper, children mock, turning terror into farce. You realise they are rewriting the story already, shaping memory into something less sharp. Historians will one day puzzle over how folklore blurred fact, but here you see it happen in real time. Still, sorrow presses in. Some children grow silent at odd times, staring at empty chairs or clutching trinkets left by the dead. Girl keeps a ribbon from her mother, twirling it between her fingers as she watches sheep graze. A boy wears his father's boots, though they swallow his legs, stumbling yet refusing to take them off. They are resilient, yes, but their play is stitched together with loss. The scar runs deep, invisible yet undeniable. You remember one evening when a storm rolled in, rain-hammered rooftops and families huddled together by the hearth. The children invented a tale about thunder being the laughter of saints chasing the plague away. They shouted each crash into triumph, clapping their hands as lightning split the sky. Adults smiled faintly, grateful for a new story to replace the old one. For a moment, the plague was not death, but something vanquished by the voices of children. That, you realise, is power, small voices reshaping terror into myth. And yet, responsibility remains. With so many adults gone, children step into roles no one prepared them for. A boy sharpens tools with hands still soft, nicking his fingers more often than not. A girl carries water buckets that drag grooves in the ground, her thin frame trembling with effort. You help when you can, but you also know, without them, the village would collapse. Their labour, though unintended, has become the backbone of survival. At dusk you watch them gather in small knots, whispering secrets, sharing crusts of bread. They talk of dreams, flying across the hills, discovering treasure in empty manors, finding hidden worlds under the church floor. Their eyes shine in the firelight, and you realise dreams may be their greatest inheritance. Adults cling to survival. Children imagine beyond it. Perhaps that, more than fields or rents, will shape what comes next. Historians still argue whether the plague created a generation marked by trauma or by strength. Standing among these children, you feel it is both. They carry shadows, yes, but they also carry sparks, sparks that might ignite futures freer than yours. You hope they do. As the night deepens, you lie awake, listening to faint giggles drifting from the lane. The sound is thin, carried by wind, but it threads through the dark like a candle flame. You smile in the quiet, and for the first time in days, sleep feels gentle. The children of survivors are not just heirs of loss. They are proof that life insists on continuing, even when the world has stopped. The church bells still ring, though their tone feels different now. Where once they marked weddings, festivals and holy days, now they echo across half-empty streets like hollow reminders. You walk toward the chapel, passing weathered shrines draped with ribbons and wax stubs from candles burned to nothing. Faith remains, yes, but it trembles. The plague did more than take lives. It cracked the certainty that prayers alone could shield you. Inside the chapel, you sit on a rough wooden bench. The air smells of smoke and tallow, thick and sour like 1,000 desperate petitions pressed into wax. Before the altar lies a heap of objects, broken rosaries, scraps of cloth once touched to relics, charms made from bone and feather. People once believed these would protect them. Some still cling, kissing the cold surface of icons until their lips chap. But others frown, whispering doubts. If holy water could not wash away the pestilence, what can? You remember nights when villagers paraded through the streets chanting litanies, whipping their own backs bloody under the moon. They begged God to notice, to turn away wrath. You watched, half horrified, half hopeful. But the plague marched on regardless. Historians still argue whether these processions spread infection faster, but to you it seemed cruelly ironic. Suffering piled on suffering, and the heavens silent. Now, new murmurs rise. A man mutters about foul air and poisoned wells. A woman swears it is the stars burning in hostile patterns above. Another insists it was punishment for greed and sin. You find yourself caught between belief and doubt. The priest preaches that God tested his flock, yet even he looks thinner, his voice brittle as though he doubts the words spilling from his own mouth. Outside, the village tries new rituals. Housewives hang herbs over doors, rosemary, lavender, wormwood, anything to cleanse the air. Children draw chalk circles, convinced spirits cannot cross them. Old women burn resin and mutter charms so old even they forget the meanings. These things feel both foolish and strangely comforting, like carrying a stone in your pocket because it fits your palm just right. Quirky, yes, but in a world where doctors stuffed beaks with herbs, who can laugh too hard? One evening you follow a neighbour to the edge of the fields. He shows you a pit filled with smouldering fires, saying the smoke will purify the village. Another neighbour shakes his head, claiming nothing works unless you confess every sin you've ever whispered. You wonder if belief is fracturing into 100 pieces, each shard sharp enough to cut. Still, the rituals bring people together. You notice it during a vigil when families gather, clutching candles, singing hymns so faint they nearly vanish in the night. The sound wavers, carried by fear and faith alike. You sing too, even if part of you doubts. The melody is less about God hearing, more about not being alone in the dark. Perhaps that is the true purpose of ritual, not salvation, but solidarity. Historians debate whether the Black Death pushed Europe toward new ideas, science, reason, even rebellion against authority. Sitting there, you feel the first stirrings yourself. Doubt seeps in, not to destroy belief entirely, but to bend it, reshape it. You still cross yourself, still bow your head, yet you also sniff the air, wondering if foul odours truly carry death. You pray, but you also check the wells. Children notice the cracks too. They mock priests with play sermons, standing on stools and declaring nonsense miracles like turning mud into porridge. You laugh despite yourself. Their mischief is harmless, but also revealing. They are testing the weight of old stories, finding them lighter than before. Faith is not gone. It just no longer feels unbreakable. You recall a night when lightning struck the church roof. The villagers gasped, some screaming that God had abandoned them. Yet the next morning they patched the damage with planks and tar, muttering prayers as they worked. Faith may fray, but habit holds strong. People still kneel, still cross themselves even as questions gnaw beneath the surface. The tension shows most at funerals. Once, burials were solemn, thick with incense and ritual. Now, with so many dead, they are hurried, stripped of ceremony. Families whisper a single prayer, then cover the body with earth. Some priests bless graves with trembling hands. Others avoid them altogether, afraid of contagion. Grief without ritual feels jagged, unfinished, like a song cut off mid-note. Perhaps that is why people invent new customs, leaving bread at crossroads, tying ribbons to trees, murmuring charms into the soil. The old ways falter, and new ones sprout like weeds through cracks. You sense yourself changing too. Where once you accepted sermons without question, now you listen with half an ear, your mind drifting to practical tasks, storing grain, mending roofs, guarding against rats. You do not stop believing in God, but you believe also in your own hands, in smoke, in herbs, in small acts that make you feel less helpless. Faith alone is too heavy. You balance it with scraps of reason. At dusk you sit by the hearth, watching smoke curl. The fire pops, the shadows flicker, and you whisper a prayer. Not because you're sure it works, but because silence feels worse. Belief now is fragile, patched like an old cloak. Yet even patched, it keeps out some of the cold. You wonder if this is how the world changes, not in sudden revolutions, but in countless quiet moments where certainty cracks and people improvise. Historians will call it transition, a step towards something new. You, sitting by the fire, call it survival. Faith bends, reason creeps in, rituals blur, and somehow you endure. You lean on your hoe, sweat trickling down your back, and look across the empty fields. Once these acres belonged to the Lord, dotted with labourers bent double, scything, ploughing, hauling. Now half the cottages stand abandoned, their doors swinging open like toothless mouths. Where there were 30 pairs of hands, maybe 10 remain. The wheat is patchy, the weeds bold, and for the first time in your life you realise something strange. You're not desperate to beg for work. Work is desperate for you. The Black Death has twisted the old order. Before, you and your neighbours lined up outside the manor, caps in hand, thankful for a day's wage, fearful of dismissal. But now the Lord sends his steward to knock on doors, voice dripping with sudden courtesy. Might you be available to help with the harvest? The words sound almost polite. You bite back a laugh. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the birth of real wage negotiation for peasants. But you feel the shift in your bones. You test the waters. When the steward offers the usual penny, you shake your head. 2, you say, heart pounding. He sputters, red as beetroot, yet in the end he agrees. What choice does he have? Fields do not plough themselves. You walk home dizzy, not just from victory, but from the realization that the old balance of power has cracked. Around the village fire, others share similar stories. A boy of 14 hired to mend fences demands boots as part of his pay. A widow insists on keeping a portion of the grain she threshes. These demands, small but daring, would have been unthinkable years ago. Now, they stick. The lords may grumble, but they are outnumbered by weeds, not workers. Still, the changes spark tension. One evening you overhear older men muttering that the king may intervene, forbid wages from rising. They are right. Edicts will come, attempts to freeze the world back into its old shape. Yet laws mean little when bellies rumble. A parchment decree cannot hoe a field. The scarcity of hands is its own rebellion. You see it clearest at harvest. The manor's barns sag under expectation, but fewer sickles flash in the sun. The steward tries to push harder, shouting, threatening. Workers shrug. Find someone else, they say, though both know there is no one else. For once silence is power. The steward swallows his anger, and by dusk he agrees to better terms. You taste satisfaction like fresh bread, but leverage carries risk. Neighbours whisper that if peasants rise too high, lords may lash back. Some fear violence, others taxation, still others divine punishment. You wonder too, can balance last when built on so much loss? The fields look fertile, yet beneath the soil lies a graveyard of bodies. Prosperity, it seems, grows directly from absence. Children notice the difference as well. They boast about new shoes, fuller meals, strange luxuries like salted fish or bright ribbons. They do not remember the hunger before, the endless bending without reward. To them, this is simply life. You smile, though unease lingers. Can such gains hold, or will they vanish like smoke? Historians still debate how long these labour victories endured, but in your world, even a single season of dignity feels miraculous. One morning you pass a neighbour's field and notice something peculiar. He tills his own land alone, without steward or overseer. When you ask, he explains that with so many tenants gone, the manor granted him rights to farm more acres directly. His family eats better now than ever before. He grins, a little wild, like someone tasting freedom for the first time. The thought spreads through you like fire. What if someday peasants could own more than scraps? What if you worked for yourself, not for a distant lord in a stone hall? At night, by the hearth, you imagine strange futures. A world where labourers bargain as equals, where wages rise with demand, where hunger no longer bows back so quickly. Dreams, perhaps, but dreams take root in soil loosened by catastrophe. Of course, resistance comes. A neighbouring manor posts notices forbidding peasants from leaving. A guard patrols the lanes searching for runaways, yet you hear whispers of workers vanishing in the dark, turning up in far-off villages where wages run higher still. Like birds, they follow the wind of opportunity. Quirky detail. One man claimed he disguised himself as a wandering minstrel to slip past guards, though his lute had only 2 strings. You laugh at the image, freedom carried on broken music. The church watches closely too. Priests preach against greed, warning that higher wages invite damnation. You bow your head but feel the hypocrisy. Did priests not accept offerings for prayers during the plague? You recall handing over your last coin for a blessing that failed to save your cousin. Now they scold you for earning a fair day's pay. Faith frays further when weighed against empty stomachs. Yet, despite doubts and risks, bargaining reshapes daily life. You work fewer hours and still manage to bring home more bread. You notice your back aches less, your temper flares less. Even laughter comes easier. Poverty has not vanished, but it no longer feels inevitable, as though carved in stone. Instead, life bends, however slightly, to your will. At a village feast, the first in months, you sit beneath flickering torches, bread warm in your lap, ale foaming in mugs. Neighbours trade stories of bargains struck, lords humbled, fields reclaimed. The air buzzes with cautious pride. For once, peasants toast not just survival, but small victories. You lift your cup too, feeling bold enough to believe change might last. Later that night, lying on straw, you whisper to yourself, "The plague took so much, but it also opened cracks in the walls that held you down. Through those cracks, light slips in. You close your eyes, and for the first time, you do not dream only of death. You dream of bargaining, of choice, of a future that might belong even a little to you. The first time you return to the market square, you almost do not recognize it. The cobbles are the same, the church tower still casts its crooked shadow across the stalls, but the air carries a new weight. Where once there was a roar of voices, hawkers shouting prices, children squealing, pigs squealing louder, now the noise is thinner, hesitant, as though the market itself has forgotten how to breathe. You pause at the edge, clutching the small purse of coins hidden in your cloak. Your heart beats fast. The plague emptied this square for months. You remember passing it when it was silent, wind rattling loose shutters, the fountain clogged with weeds, stray dogs nosing among fallen baskets. That silence had been worse than any sermon. It felt like proof the world had ended. And now, tentatively, it stirs again. The first stall you see belongs to a widow selling onions. They are small, shriveled, their papery skins rustling in the breeze. Still, she stacks them carefully, her hands trembling with both hope and fear. You move closer, drawn less by the onions than by the fact of her being there. Her eyes flick to yours, wary. She does not call out a price. Perhaps she's forgotten how, or perhaps she waits to see if anyone dares approach. When you finally drop a coin in her palm, she exhales as though she'd been holding her breath since last year. Around her, the market limps forward. A fisherman lays out strips of dried herring, their smell of salt and smoke cutting through the damp air. A baker places dark loaves on a cloth, bread denser and smaller than before, yet precious as treasure. Children dart between stalls again, though their games are subdued. They stare at the goods as though seeing magic. Red apples, cracked pottery, bolts of cloth, all reminders that the world still contains colour, but the gaps strike you. Entire families of merchants are gone. Where once stalls crowded shoulder to shoulder, now there are holes, wide, ugly holes. You see empty tables with broken legs, collapsed awnings rotting in the rain. It is like looking at a smile missing half its teeth. Every absence tells a story. A weaver dead, a spice seller vanished, a tanner's booth abandoned to dust. You imagine them standing there, haggling, sweating, laughing. The ghosts linger more heavily than the living. Prices sting too. Bread costs double, sometimes triple. Grain sacks are guarded like gold. You overhear two women arguing with the miller, voices sharp. You rob us because you can. He shrugs, claiming the fields lie fallow. Rats eat the rest. Nothing is left. Scarcity justifies everything. Historians still argue whether inflation after the Black Death was inevitable or opportunistic. But standing there with your purse growing lighter, you feel it as both punishment and betrayal. Yet even as tension simmers, resilience glimmers. You buy a hunk of bread. It is coarse, dark and heavier than stone, but when you bite into it, the taste nearly undoes you. For months you ate thin gruel, scraps, whatever could be begged or foraged. Now, this crust tastes like memory, like life clawing its way back. You chew slowly, letting the flavour soak into you like a blessing. Not everything for sale is sensible. A man sells charms carved from rat bones, promising they will ward off the next plague. Another hawks jars of blessed smoke. When he lifts a lid, a stench like burning dung rolls out. You gag, then laugh, though some buyers clutch their jars with solemn devotion. Hope is a commodity too, perhaps the most profitable of all. You notice women dominate the stalls. Widows, daughters, sisters, those left behind, run the trade. Their voices ring clear as they haggle, their eyes sharp as knives. Men mutter, uneasy at this new order, but hunger silences complaint. You sense something shifting. In the gaps left by the dead, women step forward, filling roles not out of choice but necessity. The market does not care who sells, only that something is sold. Tension erupts in flashes. Two men wrestle over a sack of barley, fists flying until others pull them apart. A child sneaks an apple, is caught, then let go when his mother begins to sob. People stand too close, eyes flicking sideways, each half afraid the cough of a stranger might herald disaster's return. The plague is gone, but its shadow lingers, making every bargain feel edged with risk. Yet music returns. A fiddler stands by the fountain, bow scraping across strings worn thin. His tune is rough, but children clap, women hum, and a few men even stamp their feet. The sound cuts through the gloom, sharp and bright. You find yourself smiling without meaning to. Music, more than coins, feels like proof the market lives again. A ribbon seller appears too. Her goods are simple, strips of dyed cloth, bright crimson and blue. Useless, impractical, and yet you cannot resist. You buy one, tie it around your wrist, and for the first time in months you carry something beautiful. Every time you glance down, the colour startles you, reminding you that joy can be worn as easily as grief. Toward evening the crowd thins. Merchants pack their baskets, customers cradle bundles like newborns. Smoke drifts from roasting meat, the last smell to fade. You walk home with your purchases, a loaf, a small sack of beans, a ribbon on your wrist. Your purse is lighter, your worry heavier, yet your heart strangely steadier. At supper you share bread with neighbours. The crust is hard, the beans few, but you all chew slowly, savouring. Between mouthfuls you speak of the market, not of prices, but of people, of stalls returning, of music echoing off stone. The plague may have stripped everything, but it has not stolen the instinct to gather, to bargain, to share. Historians will later say markets were the veins through which recovery pulsed. To you, sitting by the fire, it feels simpler. As long as there is trade, there is life. And tonight, with bread in your mouth and laughter faint in your ears, you believe it. The village feels different after sunset. Smoke curls from chimneys, soft and grey, blending with the last light, and the air smells faintly of wet earth and burning wood. You walk slowly along the lane, noticing small signs of remembrance everywhere. A candle stub left on a doorstep, a ribbon tied to a branch, a stone carefully balanced in a pile. The Black Death has left behind more than emptiness. It has left memory carved into every corner. Families have devised their own rituals. They cannot fill the churches, cannot afford grand monuments, so they improvise. You stop at a yard where a mother has laid out a small altar, a wooden box with flowers from the field, a loaf of bread, and a bowl of water. She whispers her prayers into the night, pauses, then sprinkles water over the earth. You recognize the rhythm of grief, of hope, of endurance, all wrapped into a few deliberate motions. Children watch closely, curious and serious. Some carry twigs to place near graves, believing the spirits will carry messages to those who died. Others make chalk outlines of loved ones, drawing in the dust where their feet once walked. You see a boy light a small candle, his tiny hands trembling, and the flame reflects in his wide eyes. You remember the same candlelight from before the plague, when family gatherings felt endless and secure. Now it is fragile, precious, and far more meaningful. The rituals vary widely, and sometimes they clash with old beliefs. Priests frown at some practices, sprinkling flour over the soil, tying strings to doorposts, but they are powerless to stop them. The villagers are inventing customs in real time, blending fragments of memory, superstition, and grief. Historians still argue whether these improvised rites were precursors to modern commemorations, but to you, standing among them, The act of remembering is everything. You pass a field where a cluster of villagers kneels. They hum a tune, soft and uneven, while scattering seeds over mounds of dirt. "For those we lost," whispers a woman, eyes closed. You kneel beside her, touching the soil with your hands. The scent is rich, loamy, mixed with faint ashes from hearth fires. Each grain pressed into the dirt feels like a word in a conversation with absence. Some rituals are quirky. One man insists on leaving a small shoe on the roof to guide the dead home. A woman hangs tiny dolls from a tree, claiming they carry messages to children who passed. You chuckle quietly, but part of you admires the logic. The dead may be gone, but the living must find a way to speak to them, to feel less powerless. Humour softens grief, as much as grief sharpens memory. The night grows colder. You wrap your cloak tighter, the fabric rough against your neck, and notice that every yard, every doorway, every field has some token of remembrance. Candles flicker, casting long shadows. Someone hums a faint melody that drifts across the lane. You do not recognize the tune, yet it resonates in your chest. The village, once silent in fear, now hums with memory. The dead are present in absence, alive in the rituals that the living shape. Sometimes you stop to watch the children. They place flowers, draw chalk, whisper names. Their actions are not guided, not instructed. They improvise. A girl lays wildflowers at a patch of grass she says reminds her of her cousin. A boy arranges stones in a circle, murmuring a story his grandmother told him. Each gesture is small but deliberate, a protest against forgetting. You feel something warm stir in your chest. Survival is not just about keeping bread in the belly, it is about keeping memory in the heart. A few elders wander among these ceremonies, offering murmured advice, stories, or gentle corrections. They encourage, never impose, letting traditions evolve naturally. You notice how even small deviations, like scattering seeds instead of burning incense, carry meaning, blending the old with the new. Rituals are no longer rigid. They are living, flexible, and profoundly human. You pause at a small shrine where a candle is nestled in a cracked pot, the wick nearly burnt down. The glow illuminates a patch of moss and soil. You kneel, press your palm to the earth, and whisper the name of someone lost. It is private, unceremonious, yet somehow more powerful than a full service. In this act, grief becomes something you can touch, hold, and release in measured doses. Historians still debate whether such improvisation strengthened communal ties or simply reflected despair, but here it feels like both. As you wander from yard to yard, watching candles flicker and children place stones, you realize that memory is not passive. It is a task, a duty, a form of care. Each ritual, no matter how small, reaffirms life even as it honors death. By midnight, the rituals settle into a rhythm. The village is quiet now, the candles guttering. Smoke from hearths curls into the night, carrying the faint smell of bread and ash. You feel a gentle weariness, like muscles relaxed after work. Yet beneath it lies a subtle pulse, the knowledge that those gone are not entirely gone. They live in these acts, these improvised customs, these small ceremonies that stitch together community from loss. You lie in bed afterward, listening to the distant hum of a final candle burning out, the soft creak of the house settling. Sleep arrives gently, guided by the memory rituals of your neighbours, your children, and yourself. In your dreams, you see the village alive, candles flickering, laughter and whispers mingling. The dead are present, yes, but not overwhelming. They are companions, witnesses to a world that still endures. The Black Death reshaped everything. Families fractured, labour shifted, markets emptied, faith wavered. But here, in the quiet persistence of memory, you glimpse continuity. Life continues not despite loss, but alongside it, measured by rituals, song, and small acts of remembrance. You carry this forward into tomorrow, the next planting, the next meal, the next story. You step onto the cobbled streets of the town and immediately notice the gaps, where shops once pressed shoulder to shoulder, now wide spaces yawn, doors ajar, some leaning, some entirely collapsed. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, but the scent is faint, sparse, unlike the heavy melange of bread, tallow and sweat you remember. The Black Death has hollowed out neighbourhoods as much as it has emptied lives, and walking here feels like stepping through a dream half faded. Urban life has changed. Street vendors call their wares more softly, their voices cautious, almost surprised at your presence. You notice the once bustling bakeries now filled with fewer apprentices, the ovens dimmer, the bread smaller and denser. A man carries a crate of eggs alone, balancing it carefully on his hip. Before, he would have been one of 5, shouts and jostling blending into chaos. Now he is solo, and the strain shows in the tilt of his shoulders. You realise labour shortages are not just a rural problem. They ripple through the town's veins as well. The streets are quieter in other ways too. Children, once everywhere, now dart only in small groups, cautious around abandoned houses. Windows gape empty, broken glass crunching underfoot. Cats slink through shadows, bold in the absence of people. You pause at a square where the fountain's water runs slow and murky. Children once splashed here, their laughter carrying across the stones. Today, only a few linger, kicking stray leaves. You hear their voices, muted yet resilient, and feel that fragile pulse of life threading through the ruin. Markets have adapted too. Stalls cluster where traffic is higher. Vendors share space, sometimes even pooling wares into a single display. One woman sells onions beside a boy offering herbs. Both call out prices, jostling for attention. You notice older men watching warily, muttering that the youth are bold now, unafraid of authority. Indeed, the hierarchy of old towns feels frayed. Historians still argue whether urban centres permanently reshaped social relations post-plague, but you see the cracks clearly. Necessity has loosened rigid expectations, and people move with a little more freedom. Buildings tell stories of absence. Some cottages sag, doors hanging on broken hinges, chimneys toppled. Others have been repurposed. A carpenter's shop becomes a temporary dwelling, its anvil pressed against a mattress. You step inside one such house and smell dust and smoked meat, the strange combination of habitation and decay. Someone has swept a path, left a small fire pit, and even strung a string of herbs across a beam. Life refuses to wait, you think, even when walls threaten to collapse. The guilds are quieter too. Workshops once crowded with apprentices now hum with fewer hands. A weaver's loom sits idle for half the day. The master adjusts his schedule to meet labour, not tradition. Women have stepped into roles previously barred, spinning, hammering, trading goods. You observe a girl balancing a tray of spun thread across her head, as though it were a crown. Quirky, yes, but remarkable. She embodies the adaptation of urban labour, filling gaps left by death. Social dynamics have shifted. Nobles and merchants are less assured of obedience. Servants vanish. Families of labourers vanish. And townsfolk speak with a cautious boldness that would have been unthinkable before. You overhear a debate outside a tailor's shop, whether a wage increase is fair, whether extra hours should be demanded, and who truly owns the streets they live on. You smile, quietly impressed. Even if the old lords murmur their disapproval, the streets now answer differently. Fear lingers, of course. People glance sideways, wary of strangers, still carrying faint memories of the plague's sudden sweep. A cough in the alleyway draws attention. Someone crosses themselves. Even the children, while playing tag among ruins, pause when a rat scurries past or when a distant bell tolls. Yet, amidst fear, resilience is visible. Bartering, repair work, communal kitchens, all these small acts signal life insisting on persistence. Curious rituals appear in response to urban change. Residents leave bread and coins at the thresholds of abandoned houses, murmuring prayers for those who once lived there. You pause to add a coin yourself, feeling the weight of history under your fingertips. Strange, maybe, but comforting. Tradition merges with improvisation. Grief becomes practical, remembrance functional. Scholars debate whether these urban memory practices influence modern civic rituals, but standing there, you feel their profound necessity. The townscape itself is different. Streets once filled with carts are now quieter. Some roads are overgrown with weeds, fissures spreading through stones long trodden. But life continues. A blacksmith hammers a glowing bar in his doorway, sparks flying into twilight. A baker carries a tray of bread down the lane, balancing it with careful precision. A child chases a dog across cracked cobbles. Life has adapted to scarcity, bending rather than breaking. Even leisure persists in tiny forms. Musicians play on corners, their instruments slightly damaged, their tunes slightly off, yet the people gather to listen. Children play marbles and spin tops in puddles, their laughter thin but persistent. Small festivals arise spontaneously. A harvest celebration in a half-empty square, a dance in a repurposed hall. Urban life, you see, is both diminished and tenacious, a strange hybrid of old customs and new adaptations. You walk past a tavern where a single mug of ale costs more than it did before. Patrons crowd the benches, whispering news, gossip and barbed jokes about lords, clergy and absent neighbours. The conversation threads are thinner, but richer. Each word carries weight because each person's presence is precious. You sip the air as much as the ale, tasting both community and survival. Historians still argue whether these post-plague urban adjustments were temporary or transformative. You do not need their verdict. Standing in the square, smelling bread and smoke, hearing distant hammering and children's laughter, you know the town has changed. Its rhythm is slower in some ways, sharper in others. Authority is frayed, life is precious, and community is both fragile and stubbornly persistent. Night falls. You trace the outlines of familiar streets with new eyes. Windows glow with candlelight, smoke rises from chimneys, and the occasional shout or laugh pierces the quiet. The town is not what it was, nor will it be. It is something new, formed from absence and adaptation, loss and persistence. You step home with that strange mixture in your chest, grief for what was lost, awe at what endures, and cautious hope for what might still be built. You step into the village square just as the sun dips behind the hills, casting long shadows across uneven cobblestones. The air smells of damp earth and smoke from hearths, mingling with the faint sweetness of bread cooling on windowsills. People are gathering not because of any official order, but because the plague has shown them that survival is not just about food, it is about each other. Community bonds are fragile, yet they pulse here, quiet but insistent like water flowing under a frozen river. You watch neighbours carry baskets of vegetables, bread and scraps of meat to a shared table, arranging them with careful precision. Children scurry about, collecting empty bowls, delivering water and sweeping up crumbs. The work is rhythmic, almost meditative. You join in, carrying a crate of onions, feeling the weight in your hands and the warmth of cooperation in your chest. It is labour, yes, but also ritual, a declaration that life continues together. Conversations bloom in these shared spaces. You hear stories of lost family members, of houses abandoned, of fields left fallow. But these tales are not meant to dwell in despair. They are reminders, woven into laughter, sighs, and gentle admonitions. One woman jokes about her missing cat, claiming it has probably joined the dead in a secret council. You laugh softly, though you feel the twinge of grief beneath it. Humour is as essential as bread, binding hearts even when loss looms large. Trust is tentative but growing. You notice villagers exchanging favours. A man offers to mend shoes in exchange for help stacking firewood. A widow trades milk for firewood. A baker allows a hungry child to take a loaf, trusting the family will repay later. These micro-contracts carry weight now that official authority feels uncertain. Historians still argue whether the Black Death permanently transformed local governance and social norms, but standing here, you understand that necessity accelerates cooperation, and cooperation reinforces survival. Children are central to this network. They run errands, relay messages, and entertain the group with improvised games. A boy balances a wooden spoon on his nose while a girl spins a ribbon like a flag. Their laughter echoes across the square, fragile but persistent, a proof that life insists on continuity even amidst shadows. You pause to watch, realizing that trust is not only taught but performed, repeated daily, like a chant or prayer. Rituals of care appear spontaneously. You see a group gathering around an elderly woman, sharing warm soup and blankets. Another cluster huddles in the corner, quietly sewing patches into worn clothing. These acts are not required. They are chosen, deliberate, and small. But each adds a thread to the social fabric. Quirky as it seems, one man ties tiny bells to doorposts to ward off misfortune, while children laugh and imitate the sound. Yet even this levity carries communal weight. The town is alive with shared symbols, blending superstition, humour and care. You move toward a small meeting of men and women discussing repairs to a collapsed fence. They speak calmly, negotiating roles and resources, their voices laced with patience born from experience. Decisions once imposed by lords or guilds now emerge organically. People are learning that collective problem-solving works, and that survival relies on shared responsibility. You marvel at how quickly necessity reshapes relationships and hierarchy. Even the church adapts. Priests no longer issue rigid commands but sit among villagers, offering counsel, listening to grief, and sometimes assisting with food distribution. Their authority feels less absolute, yet more respected in a quiet way. Faith and social cohesion intertwine here, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes beautifully. Scholars still debate whether such adjustments in religious practice marked a turning point in lay-clergy relations, but you feel its effects palpably. The priest is not distant. He is part of the network, a participant in community resilience. Storytelling strengthens bonds too. Around fires, villagers recount events of the plague, lessons learned, and clever improvisations that saved lives. One man describes a rat infestation and how he tricked them with grain traps shaped like miniature labyrinths. You chuckle at the ingenuity, but also feel a hum of admiration for the creativity born of desperation. Memory becomes a tool for cohesion, for instructing and amusing simultaneously. Markets are integrated into social repair. Vendors offer leftover produce to communal tables, tradespeople barter openly with neighbours, and children run errands delivering messages and small goods. Exchange becomes both practical and symbolic. It reminds everyone that each person contributes to the survival and well-being of the collective. Scarcity persists, yet the act of giving, small or large, enriches community ties. Even disputes are handled differently. Arguments about stolen firewood or miscounted coins are met with discussion and negotiation, rather than outright violence. People recognize that trust is precious, fragile, and worth preserving. You notice a man apologizing for a broken fence, and the other shakes his head, smiling instead of scolding. The social norms have shifted. Cooperation is currency, laughter a glue. Music threads through these moments. Someone strums a lute on a stoop. Another hums quietly while sewing. Children drum on empty pots and wooden spoons, improvising rhythms that echo off the stone walls. The soundscape is uneven, rough, but deeply alive. You close your eyes for a moment, letting it wash over you. Even amid scarcity and fear, the human need to create and connect persists. By twilight the square glows with lantern light, candlelight flickering across faces and cobblestones. Villagers settle around shared fires, drinking tea or broth, whispering stories, recounting minor victories. You sit beside an elderly couple who survived the plague together, listening as they detail the oddities of empty streets, abandoned carts, and quiet miracles of survival. Their stories are personal, yet communal. They remind you that everyone's experience threads into the tapestry of the village. Even grief is shared and softened. Families remember lost members collectively, leaving a candle burning in a window, placing flowers at thresholds, whispering names into the wind. The rituals merge with practical care, soup, mending, labour, and through them, sorrow becomes manageable. Memory is not erased. It is integrated into ongoing life, lending cohesion and purpose to the community. By nightfall, you notice a profound quiet beneath the warmth. The square is emptying slowly, but trust, solidarity, and shared experience linger like embers. You step home, tired but light in your chest. You realize that the bonds of community are the true measure of survival. While the plague stripped away lives, it could not strip away connection, humour, cooperation, and the improvised rituals that knit hearts together. Historians will debate whether these strengthened networks were lasting or temporary, whether urban and rural villages evolved differently. You do not need their verdict. Standing by the window of your small cottage, listening to distant laughter and soft conversation, you know that survival is more than avoiding death. It is about leaning on each other, sharing the weight of grief, and celebrating small victories together. And tonight, the village pulses with that truth. You arrive at the village square just as the evening sky turns a deep indigo streaked with faint traces of gold. Smoke curls lazily from hearths and small outdoor fires, mingling with the scent of roasted root vegetables and coarse bread. The Black Death has left the village gaunt, yet tonight there is movement, anticipation, and a quiet sense of celebration. The feast is small, modest, improvised, but its significance is immense. Tables are laid with whatever could be gathered, baskets of bread, piles of onions, charred carrots, smoked fish, and the occasional hunk of salted pork. You lift a small loaf, dense and dark, and break it carefully with your hands. The crust cracks sharply, the smell earthy and warm, and you taste it with an almost reverent patience. Food has become precious not just for sustenance, but as a symbol that life continues. Neighbours gather, carrying vessels of broth or small cakes, placing them carefully on shared boards. Children dart between tables, their faces smeared with flour and juice, laughing as they chase each other past stacks of bread. One boy balances a bowl of beans on his head while spinning in circles. You chuckle quietly, and the sound echoes faintly in the square, blending with the faint crackle of fires. Quirky acts like this serve a purpose. Levity softens grief and strengthens bonds. The feast is a rehearsal of normalcy. Elders give thanks aloud, though their voices tremble, unsure whether words suffice to honour the dead. Stories are shared, accounts of families lost, tales of narrow escapes, and humorous anecdotes about missing livestock or forgotten tools. Even amid scarcity, storytelling becomes part of the ritual, linking past hardships to present survival. Historians still debate whether such post-plague feasts were a short-lived indulgence or a long-term reshaping of communal life, but to you, it matters less than the warmth in the air. You notice how labour patterns have shifted around the table. A widow who once spent days bent over fields now organises others, instructing who serves food, who tends the fire, who carries water. Children are assigned small tasks, such as passing bread or collecting empty bowls. The act of shared labour reinforces connection, reminding everyone that each contribution matters. Scarcity heightens awareness. Food is not merely consumed, it is managed, distributed, and honoured. Conversation flows alongside eating. People discuss work, barter, and repair, weaving tales of ingenuity alongside advice for sowing seeds or mending roofs. A man describes trapping rats with small wooden mazes. A woman instructs on preserving onions by braiding them into hanging chains. Each exchange carries practical value, but also reinforces social cohesion. Even mundane talk becomes a ritual, a thread tying survivors to each other and to a collective future. Music threads through the feast. Someone beats a drum on an overturned bucket. A girl hums a soft tune while threading beans. An older man claps along rhythmically. The soundscape is rough, uneven, but deeply human. Children dance in uneven circles, spinning and leaping with abandon, their laughter punctuating the rhythm. The music is not professional, but its persistence signals resilience. Life continues despite the plague's shadow. You observe small acts of generosity. One neighbour passes around a pot of broth, ladling carefully to ensure everyone receives a share. Another divides a hunk of salted pork, and children watch as portions are calculated. These acts are unspoken rules of the feast. Scarcity amplifies the importance of fairness. The practice mirrors broader societal shifts, where cooperation and trust emerge as central to survival. You notice quirky elements in the preparations. Someone has hung small trinkets above the tables, tiny wooden charms carved with symbols of protection. Children play with them, letting them sway in the evening breeze, while adults smile knowingly. These tokens blend superstition, humour, and hope. You realise that rituals of care and celebration overlap, creating a hybrid form of communal life that is at once practical and symbolic. The aroma of roasted vegetables mixes with the faintly smoky scent of burning wood. You chew slowly, savouring the flavours, but also savouring the sound of conversation, laughter, and fire. Each bite is not only nourishment but reassurance. The village persists, relationships endure, and joy, however tempered, returns. You think about the countless meals lost to absence and appreciate the simplicity of the present. Even disputes are softened. Earlier tension about missing bread or unequal portions is resolved quickly, with laughter and gentle apologies. The feast itself enforces civility. Shared hunger fosters compromise, and shared pleasure fosters connection. You notice that even minor acts of negotiation, like ensuring a child receives extra beans, are celebrated as small victories of fairness and cooperation. As night deepens, lanterns glow, casting golden halos over faces. Shadows stretch across walls and cobbles, dancing with the flicker of flames. The feast winds down slowly. People sip weak ale or water, wipe their hands on rags, and share quiet words of thanks. Children drift asleep on benches or straw mats. Adults lean back, exhaling, momentarily unburdened. The rhythm of survival has softened into a rhythm of life. Historians still debate whether these post-plague feasts altered social norms permanently or were temporary reliefs. You do not need their verdict. Sitting on a low bench, feeling the warmth of food, company and fire, you understand that sustenance, laughter and story intertwine to hold a community together. The feast is both pragmatic and symbolic. It nourishes bodies, heals hearts, and renews hope. You linger a moment longer, watching the final embers of the fire flicker against the stone walls. Smoke rises in thin, curling trails toward the starlit sky. The village may be scarred, lives lost, fields empty, and tasks unfinished. But tonight, through food, story, music, and care, it feels alive. You breathe in the scent of bread, wood smoke, and distant flowers, and for a moment the world seems whole again. You step outside your cottage at dawn, the sky painted in pale pinks and soft greys. A thin mist lingers over the fields, wrapping everything in a gentle hush. The air carries the scent of wet earth, smoke from distant hearths, and a hint of early flowers pushing through the frost. Walking slowly, you notice how different the village feels now. Scarred by the Black Death, yet strangely resilient, it hums quietly with life, memory, and adaptation. The streets are calm but alive. You see neighbours tending gardens, repairing fences, or carrying water from the well. Children, careful but curious, chase each other through the gaps left by collapsed houses. Their laughter, delicate yet persistent, is a reminder that life, no matter how fragile, continues. You pause to breathe it in, tasting both hope and grief on the morning air. Memory lingers everywhere. Candles from last night's rituals still smoulder in the square. Ribbons flutter from branches. Stones mark spots where loved ones once rested. The villagers have stitched their losses into daily life, creating small, improvised memorials that double as acts of care. Some rituals are quirky, miniature shoes on doorsteps, twigs laid in patterns, or little dolls hanging from trees. Yet each carries profound meaning, blending remembrance with survival, grief with humour. Historians still argue whether such improvisations shaped later commemorative practices, but standing among them, you understand their necessity. Food continues to unify the village. Small communal meals, modest feasts, and shared bread remain central to life. You observe neighbours breaking hunk by hunk of dense bread, stirring thin broth, or passing small portions of vegetables. It is not luxury, but nourishment that carries both sustenance and symbolism. Each shared bite reinforces trust, cooperation, and mutual reliance. Scarcity sharpens awareness, yet generosity persists, demonstrating that even when resources are scarce, social bonds are abundant. The market hums softly in the distance. Stalls, still thinner than before, display their limited goods, and the act of buying and selling is infused with meaning. Every exchange is both practical and symbolic, reinforcing connections between neighbours and strangers. You notice women dominate many stalls, taking roles once reserved for men, while men assist where they can. Labour, authority, and social norms have shifted subtly, but irreversibly. Necessity has carved new paths for participation and respect. Urban and rural spaces alike reveal adaptation. Broken roofs are patched with ingenuity. Empty workshops house temporary shelters. Abandoned fields are slowly coaxed back to productivity. People are resourceful, repurposing, improvising, and inventing as they rebuild. You watch a blacksmith hammer a glowing bar into shape while a child sweeps ash from the doorway. These small acts, repeated daily, sustain life and reinforce the social fabric. Trust and cooperation permeate the village. Small favours, bartered goods, shared meals, and collective problem-solving have become central to survival. A man repairs another's roof in exchange for help with his garden. Children deliver messages, food, and tools. Families assist neighbours without expectation of repayment. These acts strengthen bonds, creating a web of interdependence. Scholars still debate whether the plague permanently altered local governance, yet the lived experience is clear. Survival now demands communal effort and mutual trust. Rituals of remembrance, work and play continue to overlap. Music drifts from doorways. Children play improvised games. Stories of ingenuity, survival, and minor mischief circulate. Humour, small victories, and creativity serve as glue, holding a village together frayed by absence and loss. Even disputes are tempered by awareness that conflict endangers more than feelings. It threatens the fragile equilibrium of community life. You pause at a familiar square. The fountain runs again, slow but steady, a reminder that cycles persist. Candles, flowers, and small tokens mark spaces of remembrance. Elders smile, observing children mimic them in placing stones, scattering seeds, or tying ribbons. The act of teaching and observing, of remembering together, ensures that knowledge, grief, and hope are passed on, quietly shaping a resilient culture. The feast returns sporadically, modest yet meaningful. Food is shared, laughter persists, and communal joy threads through daily toil. The act of gathering reinforces social cohesion, while reminding everyone that life is worth celebrating, even amid scarcity. You watch neighbours break bread, pass small dishes, and exchange glances that speak volumes. Each gesture, small or large, confirms belonging, continuity, and hope. Daily routines, once mundane, now carry layers of significance. Carrying water, tending gardens, feeding livestock, repairing homes, teaching children, or simply walking through streets, all are acts of preservation and commitment. The plague has reframed ordinary life as extraordinary in its resilience. Every step, every task, every smile contributes to collective recovery. You walk slowly past workshops, homes, and gardens, noticing how adaptation has altered social dynamics. The absence of old hierarchies, the shifting roles of women, the prominence of cooperative labour, and the re-emergence of communal rituals mark a new social reality. These changes ripple subtly, infusing daily life with negotiation, improvisation, and shared responsibility. Even grief is tempered by continuity. Villagers remember the dead collectively, candles, flowers, whispered names, but they also invest in life, laughter, play, repair, trade. Memory is not passive, it is active, blended seamlessly with survival. The dead are present. yet life persists. Scholars debate whether this integration of grief and life was unique or universal, but for you, standing among it, the truth is evident. Memory and adaptation are inseparable. By twilight, the village glows softly. Smoke rises, lanterns flicker, children rest, and adults prepare for the next day. You pause to take a final breath of the mixed scents: damp earth, bread, smoke, and faint wildflowers. The plague has left scars, yet continuity, resilience, and innovation persist. The community endures, shaping a world that acknowledges absence while celebrating survival. You return home, tired but buoyed. Sleep arrives with the gentle cadence, guided by memory, shared labour, small joys, and quiet rituals. You feel connected, not just to the living, but to the collective experience of those who endured, adapted, and rebuilt. The Black Death changed everything, yet in the village life continues in patterns of care, creativity, and human connection. In the morning you will rise to tend gardens, repair homes, bake bread, share meals, and watch children play. You will carry the lessons of adaptation, cooperation, and remembrance forward. The plague's shadow remains, but it does not define the village. You understand finally that resilience is cumulative, constructed daily through acts of care, humour, labour, and memory. You wake to a chill morning, the mist still hanging low over the fields, softening edges and muting colours. Smoke rises from chimneys in thin, curling threads, mingling with the earthy scent of damp soil and the faint aroma of baking bread. The village feels quieter than before, yet not empty. Life pulses softly, measured, like a heartbeat you can almost hear beneath the silence. The Black Death has taken much, but it has also left behind a new rhythm, one that is fragile yet insistently alive. As you walk past familiar cottages, you notice signs of continued adaptation. Roofs patched with reeds or boards lean against older walls. Doorways once abandoned now host small flower pots or humble boards for community notices. People move with deliberate care, balancing daily survival with acts of remembrance. You pass a family tending a garden collectively, their hands rough from work but precise, each seed planted a quiet declaration of hope. Children run between rows, carrying water or scattering compost, their laughter like a gentle promise that life persists. Shared meals remain central to the community's renewed rhythm. You find yourself at a communal table where bread is broken, soups ladled, and vegetables portioned with thoughtful hands. Conversation flows, a mixture of stories, advice, and humour. One woman recounts how she repaired her roof using scraps from a neighbour's workshop, eliciting chuckles and applause. A boy demonstrates a clever trick for catching rats, prompting laughter and nods of approval. Even in scarcity, creativity and communal pride thrive. Historians still argue whether these improvised social networks lasted beyond immediate survival, but here, in the glow of hearth fires and candlelight, their significance is undeniable. Work patterns continue to evolve. You watch women guiding groups of helpers in repairing fences, while men haul water and tend livestock. Tasks are shared according to skill, stamina, and circumstance, rather than rigid hierarchy. You notice children stepping into roles once reserved for adults, carrying messages, distributing supplies, and assisting with chores. Each act reinforces bonds, nurtures trust, and redefines social norms that were fractured by absence. Memory and grief persist alongside life. Candles, ribbons, and small stones mark places where the dead once lived, while improvised shrines and small altars hold water, bread, and herbs. Rituals blend remembrance with practicality. Someone leaves a bowl of water for travellers, while another strings garlic and herbs to ward off disease. Children mimic these acts, learning through doing, blending play with reverence. Quirky as some practices appear, tiny shoes on rooftops, dolls dangling from trees, they reinforce the continuity of life and the endurance of memory. You hear music in the distance, a soft hum, the tapping of a wooden spoon on a tin, a child attempting a lute. These imperfect sounds thread through the village, punctuating work and conversation. Laughter rises, muted and careful, yet unmistakably persistent. The interplay of grief, labour and play creates a rhythm that is both familiar and new, a heartbeat for a village rebuilding itself. The market shifts subtly, adjusting to labour shortages and altered demand. Stalls are smaller, clustered and shared. Tradespeople barter openly, negotiate new arrangements, and collaborate in ways they never had before. You watch a baker lend bread to a neighbour, a carpenter provide tools for a communal repair, and children deliver messages between households. Scarcity sharpens awareness, yet generosity persists, and each transaction carries significance beyond simple survival. Even governance adapts. Former hierarchies have loosened. Elders advise rather than command, priests assist rather than decree. Authority is fluid, responsive to need, and grounded in the trust earned through daily acts of cooperation. Scholars still debate whether this flexibility marked a permanent social transformation, but the villagers experience its effect daily. Decisions emerge collectively, responsibility is shared, and power is earned rather than imposed. As the sun climbs higher, the village hums with quiet diligence. Fields are tilled, livestock fed, roofs patched, and meals prepared. You notice small gestures, a neighbour sharing firewood, a child sweeping steps for an elder, a young woman mending clothing for another family. Each action threads into the web of communal survival, creating a living tapestry of resilience, humour, and care. By evening, the village gathers again for a modest communal meal. Bread is broken, soup ladled, and stories told, some serious, some humorous, all reinforcing the bonds forged over months of hardship. You feel the weight of shared memory pressing softly, mingling with laughter and gratitude. Each smile, each helping hand, each improvised ritual is a marker of continuity. Life endures, not despite loss, but alongside it. You linger as lanterns are lit, smoke curls from hearths, and children play quietly among patched fences and flowering gardens. Shadows stretch long and gentle, and a calm hum threads through the streets. The Black Death remains a ghost in memory, yet life pulses insistently, woven from adaptation, trust, and persistent hope. You walk home slowly, sensing the fragile, steady rhythm of the village learning to live again, alive in its grief, in its laughter, in its endless quiet work of survival. You step into a quiet workshop at dawn, the sun slanting across uneven wooden beams, illuminating dust motes drifting lazily in the air. The Black Death left gaps, not only in homes and hearts, but in skill and labour. People are adapting, repurposing knowledge, and learning new trades to keep the village alive. You watch as a woman hammers a bent nail into a makeshift frame, her movements careful but confident. Each strike echoes softly against the walls, mingling with the earthy scent of sawdust, sweat, and warmed metal. You pass a small blacksmith's forge where the master, once reliant on apprentices who vanished in the plague, now works alongside a group of children and young adults. Sparks fly from the glowing iron, striking the stone floor with a sharp pop, while the rhythmic pounding of hammer on anvil forms a pulse that resonates through your chest. You notice how quickly improvisation has taken hold. A boy carries water for quenching, another balances a tray of glowing tools, learning the rhythm by observation. Historians still argue whether these rapid skill transfers permanently reshaped medieval labour structures, but here, necessity has clearly accelerated education in real time. In the fields, adaptation takes another form. You see men and women sharing ploughing duties, experimenting with crop rotation, and new techniques for pest control. One inventive villager has tied a scarecrow's head to a pulley system, creating a rotating figure that spins gently in the wind to frighten birds. Children giggle at its motion, while adults watch, nodding approvingly. These small innovations reflect the ingenuity born of scarcity, blending practicality, humour, and survival instinct. Households are hubs of improvisation too. Kitchens echo with the clatter of repurposed tools. Spoons become stirring sticks, broken pots are patched with clay, and oven heat is rationed between baking bread and drying herbs. The smell of roasting vegetables mingles with smoky embers, filling the air with warmth and comfort. Women and men teach one another techniques for preserving food, balancing ingredients for small feasts, and creating long-lasting staples. You taste a slice of dense bread, savouring both flavour and the unspoken lessons baked into every bite. Trades are no longer rigidly gendered. You watch young women spinning flax into thread while assisting in carpentry projects, learning measurement, patience, and mechanical skill. Men carry water, weave baskets, and even tend gardens. The lines between professions blur in the wake of loss, and children grow up witnessing the flexibility of labour. The village becomes a living classroom, each task a lesson in cooperation and innovation. Quirky solutions abound. A cobbler uses dried fish to patch soles temporarily, eliciting laughter from passers-by, who marvel at the odd smell mingling with leather. A farmer experiments with feeding poultry leftover grains in a new sequence to maximise egg production. These small experiments carry risk, yet they are tolerated, celebrated, or at least accepted as necessary gambles. Survival now rewards creativity as much as diligence. You notice the transfer of knowledge between generations. Elders, once hesitant to share, now instruct youth in woodworking, baking, and irrigation techniques. Children mimic actions, adjusting and improvising, adding fresh ideas to ancient methods. Even small mistakes are learning opportunities, fostering resilience and adaptability. The plague has taught the village that survival is a collective, iterative process. Knowledge flows faster and more democratically than ever before. Communal labour strengthens social ties. Villagers repair roofs together, carry firewood in shared groups, and rebuild fences as one unit. Each effort is both practical and symbolic. Teamwork heals the social fabric torn by absence and fear. You help lift a plank, feeling the warmth of coordinated effort, the quiet satisfaction of contributing to something greater than yourself. Cooperation, humour, and persistence intertwine seamlessly. Small businesses and markets evolve. Bakers collaborate with blacksmiths to trade tools for flour. Carpenters offer their services to repair homes for shared meals. Children run errands carrying small items between households. Every exchange is practical yet ritualized, reinforcing bonds and teaching responsibility. Scarcity sharpens social awareness, and generosity becomes a visible marker of resilience. By late afternoon, the village hums with motion. Work, play, and teaching intermingle. A child spins thread, a man hammers a gate, a woman tends a garden, and a group of teenagers carries buckets of water to the forge. The village itself becomes a living organism, every action contributing to collective survival. Life is still fragile, but it is purposeful and interconnected, a rhythm built on necessity, innovation, and trust. Even leisure carries lessons. Children play with improvised toys, sticks, stones, scraps of fabric, learning balance, coordination, and teamwork. Music drifts from a corner, a tambourine tap, a child's hum, a woman softly plucking a string. Humour persists, sometimes absurd, sometimes subtle, threading through labour, sustaining morale. These tiny, quirky moments are as essential as bread, keeping spirits alive. You pause near a repaired fence, watching shadows lengthen. Sparks from the forge flicker across walls, laughter rises from the square, and the scent of bread and wood smoke drifts through the air. Skills, shared labour, and innovation pulse together, a rhythm that ensures survival. The Black Death reshaped everything, yet here adaptation thrives. Each hand, each laugh, each experiment is a small triumph, a quiet reassurance that the village will endure, learn, and evolve. You step onto the rough cobblestones of the village road as the first light of dawn brushes the horizon. Mist lingers in low-lying fields, curling around fence posts and abandoned carts, softening shapes and muffling sound. Trade is slowly returning, though hesitantly. Wagons creak along rutted paths, carrying barrels of grain, sacks of salt, and bundles of firewood. The smell of timber, earth, and freshly dug potatoes mixes with distant smoke from hearths, marking the rhythm of commerce reborn. Villagers gather at the edges of the road, offering goods, bartering produce, and exchanging small tools. You notice a careful negotiation. One woman trades a loaf of bread for a handful of dried beans. Another exchanges a jar of honey for repairs on a broken shoe. Each transaction carries weight beyond necessity. It rebuilds trust, strengthens social bonds, and reassures participants that cooperation can persist even after such widespread loss. Historians still debate whether post-plague trade permanently altered rural economies, but here, in this moment, it shapes both livelihood and community cohesion. You climb aboard a wagon heading to the next town. The driver, a wiry man with a weathered hat, cracks a thin smile and jokes about how rats have taken over the empty granaries, prompting soft laughter from the children riding along. The rickety wheels bump along the dirt road, creating a rhythmic jolt that lulls you into reflective thought. Travel has become a mixture of necessity and adventure, danger tempered by opportunity. Along the route you see abandoned fields slowly being coaxed back into productivity. Farmers tend their soil with borrowed tools, experimenting with crop rotation and pest deterrence. One young man rigs a makeshift scarecrow that rotates with the wind, startling birds and prompting chuckles from onlookers. Ingenious improvisation has become essential, a sign that life persists through creativity. Even minor feats of engineering or problem-solving are celebrated, remembered, and sometimes imitated in neighbouring households. The journey itself is a lesson in caution and adaptation. Villagers maintain distance, wash hands in streams, and avoid crowded paths when possible. Tales of sudden illness circulate quietly, a reminder that risk persists. Yet the need for trade outweighs fear. Food, tools, and information must circulate for survival. You pass a group of travelling merchants, trading seeds and cloth for eggs and milk. Everyone wears expressions of tentative optimism, testing the boundaries of safety while reclaiming normalcy. Stops along the road are small social hubs. You witness neighbours greeting each other, sharing advice and comparing innovations. One woman demonstrates a new method for preserving cabbage, eliciting nods and murmurs of appreciation. Another group debates whether to try a faster route through a marshy pass, weighing risk against potential gain. Quirky practices emerge. A child hides under a blanket pretending to be a scarecrow to amuse travellers, while elders watch, amused, and give quiet instructions for safe passage. Trade is more than commerce. It is a lesson in resilience. Each exchange sack of grain, jar of honey, or bundle of herbs carries practical value, but also reinforces cooperation. You see families adjusting their schedules to coordinate pickups, sharing wagons, and planning routes to maximize safety and efficiency. Necessity fosters ingenuity, and ingenuity strengthens community. By afternoon, you arrive at the next village. Dust swirls around carts and hooves, mingling with the scent of smoked fish, hay, and fresh bread. Markets are smaller, quieter than before, yet buzzing with cautious energy. Villagers exchange information about distant lands, new seeds, and techniques learned during months of isolation. You notice a rhythm. Even amid scarcity, trade is teaching lessons of trust, negotiation, and interdependence. Quirky local customs pepper the interactions. One merchant balances a small rooster atop his barrel of grain as a conversation starter. A child mimics the bird, flapping arms and laughing, prompting smiles all around. Humour, ingenuity, and caution coexist, blending into the texture of renewed commerce. Scholars still debate whether these social shifts had lasting economic impact, but you feel the vitality firsthand. Trade is returning, slowly, carefully, yet persistently. As evening falls, wagons rattle back toward your village. The sky glows with streaks of orange and violet, reflecting off puddles in rutted tracks. You breathe in the mingling scents of earth, smoke, and produce, feeling the pulse of interconnected communities. Trade and travel, though tentative, signal a cautious reclaiming of mobility, choice, and independence. Every mile, every conversation, every exchanged good builds not only survival, but a sense of continuity, weaving the villages together through shared effort and cautious optimism. By nightfall, you return home. The village is quiet, lit by flickering lanterns, and a faint aroma of roasted vegetables drifts from open windows. Goods from neighbouring towns are carefully distributed, shared, and stored. Children tell stories of small adventures along the road, while adults plan next day's exchanges. The rhythm of survival now includes trade, ingenuity, and trust. A delicate web reinforced mile by mile, conversation by conversation. You awaken to the sound of soft bells echoing from the small village church, their timbre delicate yet persistent, stirring the morning mist. Today is a festival day, one of the first since the plague's shadow loosened its grip. The scent of incense drifts through the square, mingling with freshly baked bread, herbs drying in the sun, and the earthy smell of damp fields. Villagers move slowly but purposefully, preparing the modest celebration, balancing reverence, joy, and remembrance. Tables are set in the open square, simple boards laid over barrels adorned with bread, root vegetables, smoked fish, and small cakes. You notice neighbours carrying offerings, a jar of honey, a woven bundle of herbs, a bowl of dried beans. Children dart between tables, carrying water or arranging flowers, their faces bright with excitement and concentration. One girl spins a small ribbon around a stick, creating a makeshift maypole, drawing giggles from passers-by. Quirky, improvised, yet profoundly meaningful. This is the village's way of marking continuity, blending celebration with survival. Religious rituals weave through the festivities. A priest leads prayers in soft tones, reminding villagers of lives lost while blessing the crops, tools, and homes. Candles flicker in small clay holders, casting dancing shadows across faces lined with toil and grief. Hymns are sung softly, sometimes off-key, sometimes in rhythm, but always with intent. Historians still debate whether post-plague festivals permanently altered religious practice. Yet here, you feel the integration of faith and everyday life, a living testament to resilience and adaptation. Music threads through the square. A boy taps a tambourine on an overturned bucket. A woman hums a gentle tune while kneading dough, and children clap along, improvising rhythm. Laughter punctuates each pause, soft and cautious, yet undeniable. The blending of sound, bells, hums, footsteps, conversation, the occasional squeal of delight, creates a multi-layered tapestry, reminding you that joy can coexist with memory and sorrow. Games return, carefully moderated. Children toss small stones along chalked lines, balance on logs, or chase each other in improvised races. Adults join lightly, tossing dice, rolling hoops, or playing simple cards. Humour abounds. A man accidentally flings a beanbag into a bucket of water, provoking laughter. A child balances bread on her head while spinning in circles. These small, playful acts reinforce bonds, teaching collaboration, patience, and creativity. Food is shared generously yet cautiously. Villagers break bread, ladle thin stew, and pass small dishes of roasted vegetables. You taste the richness of roasted onions and smoky potatoes, savouring flavours heightened by scarcity and effort. Each morsel is a reminder that life continues, a tangible manifestation of survival, care, and communal effort. Even small feasts teach lessons in sharing, fairness, and mindfulness. Conversations drift naturally between faith, past events, and practical concerns. Neighbours share advice on crop rotation, pest control, and repair techniques, interspersed with recollections of the plague and humorous tales of misadventures. Elders instruct children in proper ritual practices, while also encouraging innovation in games, songs, and small crafts. The festival becomes a living classroom, a place where memory, faith, and learning intermingle seamlessly. You notice subtle acts of remembrance intertwined with celebration. Small stones mark spots of loss. Candles glow gently in memory of absent faces. Children place tiny handmade dolls in honour of those gone. Quirky as these gestures may seem, a ribbon here, a carved stick there, they carry weight. They bind the living to the past, making absence present in a way that is both tender and resilient. Trade and travel influence the festival as well. Merchants from nearby villages bring rare spices, cloth scraps, and small trinkets, creating a vibrant, albeit cautious, market. Villagers barter, exchange, and share stories of distant towns, weaving social connections that stretch beyond their immediate environment. Even these brief interactions are educative, teaching negotiation, adaptation, and cultural exchange. By late afternoon, the festival reaches a gentle peak. Music, laughter, conversation, and prayer blend into a soft rhythm. Children fall into games, elders watch with contentment, and adults share small acts of generosity. Shadows lengthen, smoke from cooking fires drifts lazily into the sky, and the village feels simultaneously alive and reflective. You sense a delicate balance between joy and reverence, work and play, memory and hope. As evening descends, lanterns flicker in doorways, casting golden pools of light on the cobblestones. The square empties slowly, laughter fades, prayers settle, and the day draws to a calm close. The festival is over, yet its lessons linger. Resilience, adaptability, joy amidst grief, and the enduring value of shared community. Historians still debate the long-term social impact of post-plague festivals, but you feel the lived truth. Rituals, faith, play, and food intertwine to bind a village together, teaching survival and hope in equal measure. You walk home slowly, the faint smell of roasted vegetables and candle wax trailing behind, carrying the quiet reassurance that life, though altered, is steadfast and ongoing. You rise early, before the first light brushes the village rooftops. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of dew-dampened earth, smoke from distant hearths, and faint traces of herbs drying in the sun. Today is not a festival or a market day, but a day of preparation, of looking forward, of shaping a world that has been profoundly altered. The Black Death has passed its peak, yet its shadow lingers in memory, in abandoned fields, and in households still adjusting to absence. Villagers move with a careful purpose. Some mend roofs and patch walls, the rhythmic sound of hammer against wood filling the morning air. Others till fields, planting seeds in furrows softened by winter frost, their hands rough, earthy, and steady. Children carry water and small tools, participating in the collective labour of recovery, learning through action what survival, care and responsibility truly mean. Quirky improvisations continue. A young boy ties a string of shells to scarecrows. A girl balances a basket of herbs on her head while running errands. Humour, play, and inventiveness thread through every task, softening the weight of necessity. At the village square, elders and adults gather to discuss priorities. Plans for crop rotation, repair schedules, and communal projects are laid out with careful consideration. Some propose enlarging shared granaries, others suggest building a communal oven or bread kiln. Decisions are negotiated, consensus sought, and even disagreements are tempered by an awareness of interdependence. Historians still debate whether such post-plague cooperative planning had lasting effects on rural governance. But here, in practice, it strengthens ties and builds collective resilience. Trade routes are examined and adjusted. Merchants are invited cautiously, markets planned to avoid congestion, and bartering systems reinforced. You watch as villagers coordinate deliveries, distribute tools, and plan for the arrival of seeds, cloth, and other necessities. Each small step, each carefully negotiated exchange, is a lesson in foresight and community management. The scars left by absent neighbours remind everyone that preparation is not just pragmatic, it is essential. Food remains central to these preparations. Villagers organise shared meals while planning long-term storage, balancing immediate nourishment with sustainability. You see rows of herbs drying in sunlight, grains carefully bagged, and small bundles of preserved vegetables stacked neatly. Children help, learning measurement, rationing, and the patience required for long-term survival. Even the simple act of breaking bread together becomes symbolic. It reinforces trust, cooperation, and the shared commitment to a future beyond fear. You notice a new fluidity in roles. Women who once focused solely on domestic tasks now lead repair projects and coordinate trade. Men assist with planting, childcare, and domestic chores. Children step into responsibilities previously reserved for adults, demonstrating adaptability and initiative. The plague has redefined social structures subtly but enduringly. Survival now depends on versatility, cooperation, and mutual respect. Rituals and memory continue to weave into preparation. Small memorials are maintained while plans for the future are made. Candles flicker, small stones mark former homes, and children are instructed in the names and stories of those lost. Quirky practices: a doll hanging from a door frame, a miniature fence around a flower bed, serve both as remembrance and instruction, blending grief with creativity. Humour, care, and memory coexist seamlessly, reminding everyone that life persists alongside absence. By midday, communal projects are in motion. Fences are repaired, a small well is reinforced, and fields are tilled efficiently. Villagers communicate through gestures, quiet laughter, and shared routines. You assist with carrying water, observing how even minor acts, lifting a heavy pail, passing a basket of tools, or helping a child navigate uneven ground, reinforce social bonds. Cooperation is embedded in every motion, every glance, and every conversation. The day stretches toward evening, golden sunlight spilling across patched roofs, newly tilled fields, and gardens brimming with tiny sprouts. Villagers gather briefly to share stories of innovation, minor victories, and small mishaps. A boy demonstrates a clever method of carrying firewood. A woman shares tips on preserving turnips for winter. Laughter punctuates each exchange. These shared experiences teach lessons, reinforce connection, and build confidence in the collective ability to shape the future. As night approaches, lanterns are lit, smoke curls from hearths, and the village breathes softly in quiet satisfaction. Plans for tomorrow linger in conversation, yet for now the moment is celebrated in small rituals. Shared tea, a soft song, the laughter of children playing among newly mended fences. You pause, listening to the hum of the village, smelling the mingled aromas of food, earth, and herbs, feeling the pulse of life renewed. You realize that preparation is both practical and symbolic. Each repaired roof, each seed planted, each act of cooperation is a quiet assertion. Life continues, hope persists, and the community endures. Even in the wake of loss, villagers envision a future built on trust, skill, memory, and adaptability. The Black Death has altered the world, yet it cannot extinguish ingenuity, care, or the persistent desire to live fully. By the time stars glimmer above, the village settles into calm. Fires glow faintly, children drift towards sleep, and adults whisper plans for tomorrow. The rhythm of survival, work, memory, and hope carries through the night, a steady assurance that the village and life itself will endure. You breathe in deeply, feeling both weight and lightness, presence and memory, grief and hope woven together, preparing you for the dawn that will come with yet another day of persistence, adaptation, and gentle joy. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let your body sink into the quiet of the night. You've walked through streets emptied by the Black Death, witnessed fields tilled by tired but determined hands, and shared in the subtle rhythms of survival, memory, and resilience. Every cottage, garden, and hearth carries echoes of lives lost and lessons learned. Breathe slowly. Let the sense of earth, smoke, bread, and herbs fill your imagination. Picture children darting between patched fences, elders tending small memorials, and neighbours exchanging quiet smiles while performing daily tasks. Humour, creativity, and improvisation thread through each gesture, reminding you that even amid scarcity and sorrow, life insists on beauty and continuity. Listen to the rhythm of the village, hammer on wood, the soft clatter of pots, the laughter of a child, a distant bell from the church. These gentle sounds create a tapestry of ordinary survival infused with learning, care, and communal trust. Each moment, no matter how small, contributes to the pulse of a community reclaiming its life step by step. Imagine the future unfolding. Seeds planted today will grow tomorrow, repaired homes will shelter families, shared knowledge and cooperative labour will prepare the next generation. Memory, grief, and hope intertwine, teaching that survival is not only about enduring loss, but also about nurturing connection, laughter, and perseverance. Close your eyes gently. Feel the village settle around you, the quiet hum of life threading through streets, gardens, and hearths. Sleep carries you through the echoes of this story, and when morning comes, the world, like this village, awaits, ready to be lived, remembered, and cherished.